Chapter 649. What a stubborn duck. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Numerous sword shadows wrapped around him and rose to the same height as Man Hu. He said indifferently, "Are you interested in a duel with me? We'll fight to the death. Don't run away. Those who die can only blame it on their bad luck. If you can kill me, I'll say this in advance. Senior Wen won't look for trouble with you. Everyone can be my witness. Do you dare?" With Yu Qianqiu's current means, he didn't care about experts at the late stage of crossing tribulation. The only problem was that his cultivation was still lacking. If he fought with experts at the late stage of crossing tribulation, he wouldn't be able to catch up if his opponent used teleportation. That was why he provoked Man Hu. First he set a rule. No one was allowed to run. It was up to Man Hu to agree. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Man Hu shouted. Regardless of whether he could win against Yu Qianqiu or not, he couldn't lose the face of Ice Palace as the chief disciple. Haha. Yu Qianqiu laughed wildly. "Good, you've got guts." "Stop." An angry shout came. Bing Qingzi suddenly appeared. A group of 300 people appeared on the God of Wealth peak. All of them were lords of spirit severing stage. Their imposing manner was astonishing, but none of them looked good. Even Yin Baikong was astonishingly among them. However, his complexion was even worse than Yu Qianqiu's. His eyes were fixedly staring at Yu Qianqiu as if he wanted to skin him alive. Bing Qingzi's gaze landed on the collapsed Ice Palace. His hair and beard stood on end as he roared at Yu Qianqiu. "Yu Qianqiu, do you really think I won't dare to kill you? Bing Qingzi, why are you angry at a junior? What's there to say?" When Lanfeng, Lu Yanqing, and Nongzhu showed up at the crucial moment. When Lanfeng couldn't intervene in the matters between juniors. But when a group of old guys showed up, he couldn't ignore it. However, when Lanfeng had a headache. Why was this kid always causing trouble? Couldn't he just stop and rest? When Lanfeng. Bing Qingzi angrily pointed at the shop below and said, "What is the meaning of this? Don't go too far." Nongzhu glanced at it and touched her forehead speechlessly. This matter was getting out of hand. Lu Yanqing was already frowning. When Lanfeng paused and looked at Yu Qianqiu. "Put away your flying sword. What's going on? What happened?" Yu Qianqiu retorted with a question, and then he looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. The flying sword circled and danced even faster, and his killing intent erupted once again. He pointed at Man Hu and said sternly, "Man Hu, do you dare to swear that you will tell me everything that Yan Juexing did to me?" Hearing him say such angry words, everyone's gaze turned towards Man Hu. Barbarian Tiger was caught unprepared. Just a moment ago he was ready to fight, but now his heroic spirit suddenly turned into dodgy eyes. He couldn't tell them about Yan Juexing's demonic skill, so he was trying to think of a countermeasure. Everyone could see that something was wrong with his hesitation. Bing Qingzi was shocked when Yan Juexing was mentioned. He looked around but didn't find Yan Juexing. He immediately asked anxiously, "Man Hu, where is your junior brother?" Man Hu transmitted his voice, "Junior brother's demonic skill has been exposed. He should be hiding." But he shook his head and said, "I don't know." Bing Qingzi looked around carefully again. If he couldn't find Yan Juexing, it would be hard for others to find him. He felt a little relieved. However, there was someone who was not satisfied. Nongzhu took a step forward in the air, squinted her eyes and asked in a weird tone, "Yu Qianqiu, what did Yan Juexing do to you?" With Wen Lanfeng's support, Nongzhu didn't want to show up. But hearing Yu Qianqiu's angry words, she guessed that he must have suffered a great loss. Otherwise he wouldn't have disobeyed Wen Lanfeng. Although he and Yu Qianqiu were always at loggerheads, he couldn't just watch as his old friend Bai Changchun's disciple was bullied. To put it more selfishly, it was the law of the jungle in the cultivation world. Only Bai Changchun's disciple bullied others. How could he be bullied by others? If he really didn't do anything, it would be hard for him to explain to Bai Changchun in the future. When Lanfeng also noticed that something was wrong with Nongzhu. There was a faint murderous intent in her eyes. He was a little surprised, but then he understood. If this matter wasn't handled well, Bai Changchun might get out of the demon domain and the whole cultivation world would be turned upside down. Although that old guy usually hid in the demon domain and didn't say a word, once he came out, he wouldn't stop until there was a bloodbath. Instead of letting Bai Changchun come out to fight, it was better to solve it in a small area. When Lanfeng immediately pulled himself together and said coldly, "Yu Qianqiu, if you have something to say, just say it. I'd like to see who's playing tricks." A silver light flashed out of the storage bag and floated in front of him. The broad body of the sword was shining with silver light. Giant silver sword. There was a cry of surprise from below. Lu Yanqing looked at Wen Lanfeng in surprise, which didn't match his temper. More than 200 lords of the spirit-severing realm also looked at each other. They hadn't figured out the matter yet, but Wen Lanfeng had already drawn his sword. It seemed that this matter couldn't be taken lightly. Damn it. You should have done this long ago. Today, let's join hands and kill Yan Juexing. Yu Qianzhou became more courageous. He stared at Bing Qingzi and sneered, Senior Bing, you must know why I came to the Ice Palace shop today, right? Don't talk nonsense. How would I know why a junior like you came here? Bing Qingzi denied flatly. His eyes were also faintly filled with killing intent. He had wanted to take this opportunity to silence Yu Qianzhou, but when Lanfeng had also sensed that something was wrong. When Lanfeng was staring at him like a tiger watching its prey, not giving him any chance. You can't escape the truth even if you don't admit it. Yu Qianzhou snickered and surveyed the surroundings as he said, I've long heard that Yan Juexing possesses a peerless mystical art. I didn't believe it at first, but I experienced it for myself today. What a powerful demonic art. If I didn't have some special skills, I would have lost my life. Demonic art. There was an uproar in the surroundings. When Lanfeng and Nongzhu looked at each other, not knowing whether it was true or not. Bing Qingzi shouted angrily, Yu Qianzhou, don't make irresponsible remarks. It's not your turn to talk nonsense here. The lid of the pot was lifted a little, revealing the aroma of meat. Even the wolves couldn't help but smell it. Pei Fong, who was in front of the crowd, smiled with his fat face shaking. Brother Bing, he hasn't finished speaking. Why are you so anxious? If it's really nonsense, everyone will naturally know what's going on. Then he turned to Yu Qianzhou and said with a smile, Yu Qianzhou, can you explain the devil technique you're talking about a bit more clearly? It would be best if you explain everything in detail so that everyone can judge whether it's right or wrong. Otherwise, you'll wrongly accuse an innocent person. Then he turned to the people around him and shouted, Everyone, don't you agree? Not bad, not bad. A lot of people responded. Most of them were from Pei Fong's camp. Bing Qingzi suddenly stared at him and shouted, Fatty Pei, what do you mean? Do you want to hit me when I'm down? Pei Fong didn't care about him, lest he gave him an excuse. He waved his broken hand at Yu Qianzhou and said with a smile, Yu Qianzhou, speak boldly. With Brother Wen's support and so many people's support, just say it. He didn't seem to care about Wen Lanfeng's broken hand at all. How could Yu Qianzhou let go of the great opportunity to kill Yan Juexing in front of him? He looked around and said, Seniors, do you still remember that I set up a stall to sell 7-star blood orchids yesterday? After the trouble, Yan Juexing came to me and said that he wanted to buy a lot of 7-star blood orchids and asked me to meet him at the Ice Palace shop. I thought it was true and came here today. Who knew that Yan Juexing immediately turned hostile after getting the orchids? First, he used an evil method called Demon Eye Ecstasy, which was really powerful. Both of his eyes were emitting blood-red light that could take away one's soul. I didn't even know what was going on before I was controlled by him. Yu Qianzhou, don't speak nonsense to confuse us. Shut up. Bing Qingzi was really anxious. Anyone could tell that he was like a cornered dog that would do something desperate. He had the tendency to go berserk. Pei Fong winked at Qi Jiujuan and Ouyang De, and the three of them stood between him and Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou, speak boldly. Pei Fong sneered. Whether it was true or not, the three of them would benefit the most from defeating Bing Qingzi. That was why the three of them were so proactive in protecting Yu Qianzhou's safety. The gloomy Yin Baikong secretly transmitted his voice to Sikongju. Send more people to set up ambushes at all the passages of Cornucopia. Don't let Yan Juexing escape. It's best to capture him alive. Sikongju quietly left to make arrangements. Hee. Yu Qianzhou put on a fake smile and said, I reckon that Yan Juexing hasn't mastered his demonic arts. Perhaps he's still in the beginning stages. After I lost consciousness for a short while, I actually recovered. I unintentionally overheard his conversation with Man Hu. It turns out that his demon eye ecstasy can turn people into his puppets. No matter how high your cultivation is, you will still be controlled by him. Furthermore, the 7-star blood orchid can help him master his demonic arts quickly. Once he succeeds, he will unify the entire cultivation world. Since he wanted to target Yan Juexing, it was impossible for him to not add oil to the fire. He continued to ramble, as soon as my body returned to normal, I immediately fought with the two of them. TSK. He casually threw a punch called Little Demonic Fist, and actually shattered my big black saber into pieces. Amazing. My saber is a treasure saber that surpasses high-grade spiritual treasure. It actually couldn't block a single punch from him. Once he masters his demonic arts, it will be terrible. What a pity. When he saw that his demonic arts were exposed and that he couldn't kill me in a short period of time, he didn't bother me and immediately ran away. Everyone saw what happened afterward. Man Hu, the person involved, naturally knew that Yu Qianqiu was taking the opportunity to blow up the matter. He immediately shouted, "Seniors, don't listen to his nonsense. He's completely talking nonsense. He and my junior brother have a grudge in China's cultivation world. He's taking the opportunity to take revenge." Bing Qingzi also sneered, "Yu Qianqiu, do you really think that we're all 3-year-old kids that can be easily fooled?" Everyone looked at each other in dismay. It sounded too mysterious and they didn't know if it was true or not. But for Pei Fong and the other two, it was enough for them to blow up the matter. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said, "It's easy to distinguish whether it's true or not. You can call Yan Zhuixing out and confront him face to face. I have a way to force out his demonic arts." "Ignorant junior, who do you think I am? Do you think I have to listen to your orders? If it wasn't for giving face to the others, would you still be alive today?" Bing Qingzi said with a stern expression. Just at this moment, Sikongju quickly flashed over and cupped his hands towards Yin Baikong. "Master, there's news from the passageway. Yan Zhuixing has already left the treasure basin in a hurry 2 hours ago." Chapter 650. When Yu Qianqiu heard the news, he couldn't help but curse, "Bastard! I let him escape." The flying swords that were densely packed around his body were also withdrawn. He quickly flew to Wen Lanfeng's camp. The situation wasn't right, it was safer here. Everyone's gaze was focused on Bing Qingzi. Yin Baikong said in a deep voice, "Brother Bing, how do you explain this?" "What do I need to explain?" Bing Qingzi tilted his head and sneered, "You should think about how to explain to us about the 7 treasure pill." Yin Baikong immediately lost his temper and stared coldly at Yu Qianqiu. The 7 treasure pill that was sold had already claimed dozens of lives. Until now, no one had figured out what was going on. However, Yin Baikong had already locked onto Yu Qianqiu as the biggest suspect. Pei Fong laughed, "Bing Qingzi, you're trying to change the topic at the wrong time. If Yan Zhuixing didn't have a guilty conscience, why would he run?" Bing Qingzi gave Man Hu a look, and the latter quickly went to his master's side. The master and disciple had their backs to the crowd, seemingly ready to fight with their lives on the line. Bing Qingzi calmly looked around and said, "Fatty Pei, don't fan the flames here. Yan Zhuixing only went out for a while, who said he ran away." Hearing that Yan Zhuixing had escaped from the treasure basin, Bing Qingzi immediately felt relieved. It was a vast primeval forest outside, and more than 2 hours had passed. It wouldn't be easy to catch Yan Zhuixing again. At the very least, the various forces wouldn't be able to organize a large-scale capture like last time in a short period of time. He believed that Yan Zhuixing could handle it with his emergency ability. Since he didn't run, can Brother Bing summon Yan Zhuixing back so that we can ask him face to face? Pei Fong asked. "What a joke, how would I know where he went?" As Bing Qingzi spoke, he saw many people rushing towards the exit of the treasure basin. It was obvious that the various lords had already secretly ordered their disciples to search for Yan Zhuixing. He then turned to Man Hu and said, "It seems that we're not welcome here, let's go." He couldn't care about anything else now. He had to find a way to help Yan Zhuixing escape first. "I won't send you off." Pei Fong waved his hand generously. He glanced at Yin Baikong. The alliance of the 3 was about to collapse. After Bing Qingzi left, everyone would definitely find Yin Baikong to settle the 7 treasure pill. After forcing Bing Qingzi away and suppressing Yin Baikong, only Hu Changshu would be left. After resolving these big obstacles, Yan Zhuixing wouldn't be able to escape. Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangda exchanged glances, and they couldn't help but reveal a smile on their faces. The stalemate that had lasted for so many years was finally going to end. The primeval forest outside the primeval forest had existed for God knows how long. Yan Zhuixing gathered his strength and flew wildly in the sky. Once he sensed someone in front of him, he immediately hid in the forest. When there was no movement in the sky, he flew wildly again. Yen, yang shant, yent stay in the sect. Yen yunt, donk yen int. Yent from yen. T. He couldn't stay in the treasure basin anymore since his demonic arts were exposed. Most of the spirit-severing experts in the cultivation world were gathered in the treasure basin. He couldn't resist them with his current cultivation. He made a prompt decision and escaped from the treasure basin without hesitation. If he was a little later, he wouldn't be able to escape. Bing Qingzi alone couldn't deal with so many experts. Moreover, there was Wen Lanfeng behind Yu Qianqiu. At the thought of Wen Lanfeng, Yan Juexing, who was fleeing desperately, was more or less worried that Wen Lanfeng would not let Bing Qingzi and his disciple go. After all, he had attacked Yu Qianqiu, and Wen Lanfeng was obviously supporting Yu Qianqiu. If something happened to Bing Qingzi, he would lose his only backer in the cultivation world. He would have to rely on himself for everything. Yan Juexing touched his storage bag subconsciously and his eyes became firm. With these 7 blood orchids, he could make a comeback even without Bing Qingzi's support. That day wouldn't be too far away. Considering that something might happen to Bing Qingzi, Yan Juexing didn't escape to the Ice Palace. Even if Bing Qingzi was fine, he wasn't going to the Ice Palace. The lesson of being chased last time was still fresh in his mind. Presumably, various forces had already sent messages and arranged people to wait for him on the way to the Ice Palace. He just wanted to find a safe place to improve his demonic arts and cultivation with the help of the 7-star blood orchids. He wasn't worried that Bing Qingzi and his disciple would be angry at him for abandoning them and escaping alone. They should know that even if he was still in the treasure basin, they couldn't change the outcome. They couldn't protect him at all. Instead, if he escaped, there would be a chance for them to avoid a bloody battle. Because the curse on them would force them to risk their lives to save him. The only thing Yan Juexing couldn't figure out was why his magic eye ecstasy didn't work on Yu Qianqiu. Victory was already in his grasp, but in an instant he had to flee in panic. The situation was completely reversed. He thought about it all the way, but he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He took a deep breath and decided not to think about it for now. The right thing to do was to escape as far as possible. Now was the best time to escape. Even 1 more second would be good. Once the pursuers came, he would have to hide in the dense forest below again. Yan Juexing stared at the front with rapt attention as the wind blew past him. Suddenly, the pupils in his cold and firm eyes shrunk. He saw smoke rising from the distant dense forest. In such a primeval forest, there were groups of ferocious beasts. It was impossible for anyone to live here. It must be a cultivator. Yan Juexing suddenly disappeared in the air and turned into 3 wisps of green smoke that drilled into the dense forest below. Then he reappeared. Then he used the charm body movement technique. A shadow quietly stepped on the leaves and approached the place where the smoke was rising. After arriving at the destination, he gently leaned on the branch of a big tree and looked down. In the open space below, a cultivator who looked like an old urchin was rolling up his sleeves and happily roasting a golden and oily wild boar. He seemed to be enjoying it. This person was none other than third brother Xan. Ever since Lu Yanqing settled in the Wen family's shop, she let him go. Third brother Xian naturally had no objections. Without his master's restriction, he was happy and free. Then, the vast primeval forest outside the treasure bowl became his paradise. He searched for all kinds of wild animals and made up his mind to roast a wild animal that could surpass Yu Qianqiu's. Yan Juexing didn't know him, but he found that he couldn't see through his cultivation. The other party was obviously an expert at the tribulation passing stage. After carefully looking around and confirming that there was no one else, he waved his hand and lightly knocked on the tree trunk. Third brother Xn suddenly looked up and said, "Who is it?" However, what he saw was a pair of demonic red eyes that emitted a soul-stirring light. Third brother Xian's expression instantly became confused and the stick in his hand fell to the ground. After a while, Yan Juexing restrained the red light in his eyes and let out a sigh of relief. The other party's cultivation was obviously not at the soul-forming stage. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to use the demon eye ecstasy with his cultivation. Time doesn't wait for me. I have no choice but to take a gamble. Lightly floating down from the tree, he punched the bonfire on the ground with his little magic fist. With a dull thud, a deep pit was formed. After a few punches, he quickly buried the bonfire and the roasted wild boar to prevent the smoke from the fire from attracting the pursuers. Yan Juexing looked at the dazed third brother Xn and asked, "What's your name? What cultivator are you?" "Spirit Fang Valley's third brother Xn." Third brother Xian replied dully. Yan Juexing confirmed and asked, "Your Spirit Fang Valley's Lu Yanqing's disciple, third brother Xian?" "Yes." Third brother Xian replied. After getting confirmation, Yan Juexing muttered to himself. His face gradually revealed an expression of surprise and he muttered to himself, "The heavens really don't want me to die." Then he squinted his eyes as if he remembered something and said indifferently, "Dig out both your eyes." Third brother Xn heard this and without hesitation, he stuck 2 fingers towards his eyes. Just when he was about to touch his eyeballs, Yan Juexing suddenly said, "Stop." After that, he carried out a few more tests and confirmed that he really had control over third brother Xian. Only then did he relax. Previously he was afraid of Yu Qianqiu, so he couldn't help but doubt his magic eye ecstasy art. So he had to test it out first before he could be at ease. After testing it out, he didn't dare to dawdle anymore. Danger could come at any time. Waking third brother Xian up from his daze, he conveyed his order and said, "Let's go." Third brother Xian quickly rose into the sky while Yan Juexing went into the dense forest. The two of them, one in the sky and one in the forest, maintained the same speed as they quickly headed towards Spirit Fang Valley. In the end, not long after, third brother Xian discovered the pursuers before Yan Juexing with his cultivation at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Yan Juexing quickly hid in the dense forest while third brother Xian stopped in the sky. He turned around and shouted to the others, "Who are you? Why are you chasing me?" The 5 cultivators at the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage obviously knew him. They all cupped their hands and one of the leaders answered, "So it's Senior Xian from Spirit Fang Valley. It's a misunderstanding. We are the disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce. We were ordered to hunt down Yan Juexing who caused trouble in Cornucopia. Senior, did you see any suspicious people passing by?" "Hunt down Yan Juexing? What trouble did he cause?" Third brother Xian said curiously, "I even met him and had a few words with him. I didn't see any signs of him running away." "Senior, you saw Yan Juexing before?" The man's eyes lit up. He cupped his hands and said, "Can you tell me which direction he went?" "I can tell you, but don't talk about hunting. Be careful, Bing Qingzi won't let you go." Third brother Xian pointed to the left and said, "He went in that direction. When you see him, talk nicely. Fighting will hurt the harmony." After knowing where Yan Juexing went, they didn't want to talk to him anymore. The leader smiled and said perfunctorily, "We will remember. We won't disturb you anymore." The 5 of them quickly turned to the left. After watching them go far away, third brother Xian set off again in the direction of Spirit Fang Valley. Yan Juexing emerged from his hiding place and followed closely in the dense forest. After the 5 of them left, they quickly sent a message to Cornucopia. The pursuers of the World Chamber of Commerce quickly gathered in the direction pointed by third brother Xian. Such a big movement naturally couldn't be hidden from the eyes of all the forces. It immediately attracted everyone to chase in that direction. Chapter 651. Yan Juexing, who was fleeing in a hurry, bumped into several groups of people along the way, but they were all sent away by third Xian. He should be happy to pass the test easily, but Yan Juexing got angrier the more he thought about it. Whenever he thought of Yu Qianqiu, he would gnash his teeth in hatred. Different from Yu Qianqiu's ostentatious style of doing things, Yan Juexing always wanted to develop in a low-key manner, but there was someone who didn't let him have his way. From the beginning in the 100 Flowers Valley until now, as long as he met Yu Qianqiu, that guy would force him to become famous together with him. Now, one of them was the world's #1 expert below the spirit-severing stage, who had killed countless people, and he had offended everyone. The other one was an absolutely dangerous person with a peerless skill, who was coveted by many people. The 2 juniors from the Chinese cultivation world were famous in the world together. The difference was that the former had found a strong backer, and no one dared to touch him openly for the time being. The latter was unlucky. He only had Bing Qingzi as his backer, so he was easier to bully. Naturally, people would find trouble with him first. Yan Juexing really couldn't figure it out. Regardless of whether they were enemies or not, both of them were outstanding figures of the new generation in the cultivation world. Didn't that guy know that the tallest tree in the forest would be blown away by the wind? Before he had the ability to protect himself, it was simply courting death to face so many experts with such great fanfare. Even if he had a backer, he couldn't rely on him for a lifetime, right? It was a complete country bumpkin, a local tycoon, and a nouveau riche. It was a miracle that he didn't die today. This was Yan Juexing's evaluation of Yu Qianqiu. However, what he didn't reflect on was that since the day he was born in the Chinese cultivation world, he was destined to have a height and starting point that many cultivators couldn't reach in their lifetime. His grandfather was the leader of the #1 sect in the Chinese cultivation world of diabolism. His maternal grandfather was the leader of the #1 sect in the righteous path. He also had the halo of the young palace master of the 100 Flowers Palace. When others were still struggling in the Ruoshui River for basic living conditions, he was already standing on the beautiful mountain peak. He didn't even want to look at it. Instead, he kept a low profile and looked around at the crowd that had already climbed ashore, to see who could be of use to him. This was what he meant by being low-key. With a high-profile identity and qualifications, It was easy for him to say that he was low-key. But what did Yu Qianqiu have at that time? There was nothing. Living in the cultivation world where the strong preyed on the weak, not to mention dignity, they didn't even have the right to ensure their own survival. Ever since he joined On Kwangtsung, he had been in constant danger of being devoured. If you accidentally said something wrong, even if you revealed a look that made others unhappy, they could take your life. This was something that could happen in an instant. Moreover, if he died, he wouldn't even have the chance to show himself. He wouldn't even have the right to bury his head and keep a low profile. It was not easy for him to join supporting Immortal Island, but there were always people who wanted to harm him. He did the lowliest and most despised job. He was already so low-key that he couldn't be any more low-key. He almost dug a hole to bury himself alive, but he was still in a precarious situation. In the end, he was forced to abandon his dignity as a man and knelt down to beg for help for the sake of some spiritual herb seeds that could help him turn over a new leaf. It didn't matter if he lost his face, but he still owed a favor until now. A person of noble birth like Yan Zhuixing would never be able to understand the pain of a small fry like Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu sometimes looked back at the few women he met along the way. Bai Suzhen had never looked at him differently because of the change in his status. She had always helped him unreservedly. When he was tired, she was a trustworthy harbor that he could rely on. Furong also wouldn't look down on him because of his lowly status. On the contrary, from the moment the two of them met, he started to bully her. Yu Qianqiu was the only pure person left in this world until now. She treated his words as an imperial edict and did whatever he told her to do without any consideration. Yu Qianqiu couldn't imagine how guilty he would feel if he hurt her. As a result, Yu Qianqiu was in fear and trepidation. He was afraid that this girl would suffer even the slightest grievance. Whatever she wanted, Yu Qianqiu would satisfy it at all costs and put in all his effort to protect her. In fact, Furong wouldn't make any excessive requests of him. With the existence of these two women, Yu Qianqiu's heart was incomparably strong. He had the confidence to face any difficulties. Even if his final outcome was to be beaten into a cripple with 4 limbs missing, he did not lose everything. He still had the most precious thing. He had no reason to believe that these two women would still wholeheartedly accompany and take care of him for the rest of his life. They could stand the test of time. Even if he had the backing of the world's #1 expert by Changchun, it wasn't as reassuring as these two women's soft shoulders. As for the other women, if he didn't have the corresponding strength to conquer them, would they fall in love with a little cultivator who was at the mercy of others? Yu Qianqiu believed that they were also good women. However, he subconsciously didn't dare to think too deeply about it. He just constantly gave himself confidence that they were also very good women. They were very good to him, very good. Yu Qianqiu was a small character struggling in the endless weak waters of the cultivation world. He struggled to stay alive in the endless weak waters of the cultivation world. When he finally climbed ashore and wanted to rest, he found that there were ferocious beasts eyeing him covetously. A good person had become a rare animal. There were only 2 paths for him to choose. He could either live with his tail between his legs like most people, or he could risk his life to stand out and fight for his own rights. He chose the latter without any hesitation. Yan Zhuixing had the capital to be low-key, but Yu Qianqiu didn't. The latter wanted to quickly stand out and get rid of the precarious situation, so he could only prepare to be low-key and be a high-profile person. When his crazy methods started to make people afraid, he was no longer a small cultivator that everyone could bully. At the very least, those cultivators at the same level as him didn't dare to provoke him anymore. His reputation rose, and many big figures who couldn't come into contact with him in the past began to notice his existence and reached out to recruit him. Yan Zhuixing had also noticed him at that time and wanted to take him in for his own use. Until now, Yu Qianqiu's reputation in the various countries could be said to be notorious. However, he still managed to carve out a path of blood and successfully protected himself. At the very least, other than the top soul formation experts in the cultivation world, cultivators below the soul formation stage didn't dare to easily find trouble with him. This was the difference between Yan Zhuixing, who was born with a noble background and acted low-key, and Yu Qianqiu, who was born with a grassroots background and acted high-key. It was because everyone's starting point was different. There was no such thing as country bumpkin, local tycoon, or nouveau riche. At the end of the day, everyone wanted to succeed by hook or by crook. There were also many people who died in Yan Zhuixing's hands. Different paths led to the same goal, and it all depended on who won in the end. Swoosh! The giant silver sword blocked in front of Bing Qingzi and his disciple who were trying to leave the cornucopia. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. It seemed that when Lan Feng was starting to stand up for Yu Qianqiu, Pei Fong and the other two looked at each other and laughed in their hearts. It couldn't be better to directly get rid of Bing Qingzi through Wen Lanfeng's hands. Yu Qianqiu was also full of excitement. He didn't kill Yan Juexing, but it was also good to kill his backer. This guy's thinking was very simple. As long as it was his opponent's power, he would not let it go if he could eradicate it. The weaker the opponent, the stronger he would be. Bing Qingzi secretly cursed. It would probably be hard for him to have a good ending today. He turned to stare at Wen Lanfeng and said, "Wen Lanfeng, I have no enmity with you. What do you mean by this?" Wen Lanfeng's body began to emit a threatening aura. His long hair gradually fluttered behind him. He stared at Bing Qingzi ruthlessly and said indifferently, "What do I mean? Do I still need to explain?" The spirit-severing stage experts in the air retreated one after another. Once these two guys started fighting, the remaining power would be very frightening and could easily harm the innocent. Bing Qingzi also knew that he was no match for Wen Lanfeng. It was meaningless for him to risk his life. He looked at Lu Yanqing, who was wearing a gauze hat, and said, "Miss Lu, my ice palace has always been very respectful to Spirit Fang Valley. Every year we would send disciples to collect snow spirit grass and offer it. I hope Miss Lu can plead for this old man from Brother Wen on account of our many years of friendship." He was flexible and good at finding people. He found Wen Lanfeng's nemesis in an instant. As a result, Wen Lanfeng's threatening aura weakened a little before Lu Yanqing opened her mouth. Pei Fong and the others frowned at the sight. Lu Yanqing was silent for a while. She tilted her head to look at Wen Lanfeng and sighed slightly. Does everything need to be solved by fighting and killing? Although her words didn't sound like she was pleading for Bing Qingzi, it was no different from stopping Wen Lanfeng from fighting. In the end, Wen Lanfeng didn't say a word. The giant silver sword whooshed back into his storage bag. Bing Qingzi cupped his hands at Wen Lanfeng and said, "Thank you for your mercy, Brother Wen." Then he cupped his hands at Lu Yanqing and said, "I will remember Miss Lu's kindness. As long as the Ice Palace is here, if Spirit Fang Valley encounters any trouble, the Ice Palace will definitely do its best to help. Farewell." The master and disciple quickly flew away. Wen Lanfeng looked at Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu apologetically, seemingly hoping that they would understand. Nongzhu was speechless, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't stop Bing Qingzi. Everyone didn't expect that a big battle would be resolved by Lu Yanqing's words. Yu Qianqiu was both angry and amused. He didn't expect Lu Yanqing's words to have such a great influence on Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng didn't think that at this point, everyone's position was already clear. Those who were enemies couldn't be let go. Maybe people will accept Lu Yanqing's feelings, but they won't necessarily accept your Wen Lanfeng's feelings, because everyone knows that you and I, Yu Qianqiu, are on the same side, but I, Yu Qianqiu, and Yan Juexing are sworn enemies. For the first time, Yu Qianqiu had the idea of stripping Lu Yanqing naked and throwing her on the bed to vent his anger. This woman was too bullshit. If you don't know anything, don't get involved. In the cultivation world, if problems could be solved by talking nicely, then everyone would ask you to be the peacemaker. What's the point of fighting? What's the point of fighting? What's the point of fighting? There were some words that had to be said. Yu Qianqiu stared at Lu Yanqing and said in a low voice, "Senior Lu's compassion is really admirable, but I have a word of advice for you. You let the Ice Palace people go today, but if they hurt Spirit Fang Valley in the future, I hope you won't regret it." Yu Qianqiu, stop it. Nongzhu frowned and stopped him. Wen Lanfeng smiled apologetically and said, "Yu Qianqiu, I'll let it go this time. Next time, you're too kind, senior." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand to interrupt him and said indifferently, "It's better to rely on yourself than on others. I won't bother you next time. I just hope Senior Wen and Senior Lu can fulfill their promise." Chapter 652. Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing were speechless. Everyone could tell that Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing were drawing a clear line. Everyone felt it was incredible. Yu Qianqiu was really bold. He dared to speak to Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing in such a tone. Didn't he know that without Wen Lanfeng's protection, there were too many people here who wanted his life? However, the two people involved were well aware that Yu Qianqiu was fully qualified to speak to them like this because of his identity as Bai Changchun's disciple. On the contrary, the two dared not speak too harshly to Yu Qianqiu. Even if Lu Yanqing was the most beautiful woman in the world, she still felt a lingering fear when she thought of the terrifying figure behind Yu Qianqiu. That old man wouldn't care how beautiful you were, and he wouldn't show mercy to you just because you were a girl. No matter how beautiful you were, in his eyes, you were just a bag of stinky skin. If you made him unhappy, he would directly consider whether you still had the need to live. It was a completely inhuman way of thinking, and the way he dealt with things was frighteningly direct. When Lan Feng nodded silently and said, "Don't worry, I will do what I promised you," Yu Qianzhou turned to Nongzhu and said, "Let's go. Take them with us." The two people he was referring to were Furong and Zi Yu. Nongzhu shook her head, not knowing what to say, then nodded. The two were just about to leave when they suddenly heard someone shout, "Stop!" The two looked back and saw Hu Changshou flash out. He cupped his hands to Wen Lanfeng and said, "Brother Wen, this kid's words were too arrogant. He didn't put you in his eyes. There's something I'd like to ask Brother Wen about. Does this brat mean that he has nothing to do with Brother Wen from now on?" When Lanfeng suddenly looked at Hu Changshou, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Hu Changshou, what do you want to say?" "I won't lie in front of Brother Wen." Hu Changshou stared coldly at Yu Qianzhou and said, "If he really has nothing to do with Brother Wen, I want to settle the score with him for killing my Yun Palace disciple. If I still have a close relationship with Brother Wen, then I have no choice but to give Brother Wen face and let this matter drop." At this time, when Lanfeng naturally wanted to support Yu Qianzhou, but who knew that before he could speak? But he heard Nongzhu shout, "When Lanfeng, from now on, Yu Qianzhou has nothing to do with you." When Lanfeng looked back and swallowed the words he was about to say, Nongzhu sneered arrogantly and said, "I'd like to see who dares to hurt Yu Qianzhou." He was also furious. These people really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. They thought that Yu Qianzhou could be trampled upon after leaving Wen Lanfeng. At this time, if he didn't stand out, then he would have come here in vain. Otherwise, there was no need for him to beg for Bai Changchun's jade pendant. Wasn't it just a precaution? Good, very good. Wu Changshou clapped his hands and smiled. With Nongzhu's words, I can rest assured. A black shadow flashed to his side. Yin Baikong, dressed in a black robe, stood out and said with a dark face, "Since you have nothing to do with Brother Wen Yu Qianzhou, it's time to settle our debt." Wu Changshou glanced at him and chuckled. "I wonder what debt this kid owes you that it's worth Brother Yin to come personally?" "The 7 treasures pill." Yin Baikong said with a dark face, "This kid sold the 7 treasures pill to me, of course I have to look for him." Before the incident, he had sent people to look for Niu Yid, hoping to discuss the next batch of limit-breaking pills and 7 treasures pill. Unfortunately, a few days had passed and not even a shadow of Niu Yid was seen. In addition to the 7 treasures pill incident, Yin Baikong had a faint feeling that something was wrong. He even suspected that he had fallen into someone's trap. If this matter was not resolved, the World Commerce Association would be in big trouble. Everyone was in an uproar. Who would have thought that the 7 treasures pill was sold to Yin Baikong by Yu Qianzhou? Wasn't it refined by Niu Yid? In reality, the matter of the 7 treasures pill incident was only known to the higher-ups of various parties. The news had not been spread. After all, the cause of the incident was still unclear. "It's really a broken drum and a messed-up person beating." Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "Yin Baikong, what does the 7 treasures pill have to do with me? I obviously didn't want to sell it to you, but you forcefully bought it from me. Moreover, this was clearly a transaction between you and Niu Yid. I didn't earn a single spirit stone, I was only an errand boy. I don't know and I don't want to know what's wrong with the 7 treasures pill. If there's a problem, look for Niu Yid, don't look for me." Yin Baikong said with a cold expression, "If I can find Niu Yid, I won't look for you. Since you're involved in this matter, don't think of getting away so easily. Think of a way to help me find Niu Yid." At this moment, Ziyi flew over together with Hibiscus. It was Nongzhu who called the two of them over. Yu Qianzhou was startled, and the haze on his face immediately turned into a smile. He held Hibiscus's hand and said, "What are you doing here? Did someone bully you again?" Hibiscus looked around with hatred in her eyes. Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and turned back to Yin Baikong. "If you can't find Niu Yid, don't come to me to vent your anger." Yin Baikong opened his mouth when he saw Hibiscus's hateful gaze, but he couldn't say anything. Hu Changshou followed Yin Baikong's gaze in confusion. Although this woman's appearance was not bad, it wasn't enough to make this old pervert. His eyes inadvertently caught a glimpse of the black cloud-patterned jade pendant on Hibiscus's waist. Hu Changshou's pupils suddenly shrank, especially the word "Bai" on it. His mouth slowly opened as he became dumbstruck. He finally understood Yin Baikong's feelings. The 2 top experts who wanted to take this opportunity to retaliate were instantly speechless. It was indeed not a good thing for a group of soul formation experts to have such sharp eyes. When everyone's eyes touched the jade pendant on Hibiscus's waist, they couldn't take their eyes off it. Their faces were filled with disbelief. It seemed like they had seen this thing before. When Lan Feng and Lu Yanqing looked at each other speechlessly. When Lan Feng in particular was a little depressed. Even if he personally showed up, he wouldn't be as deterrent as by Changchun's jade pendant. The group of cultivators watching from below couldn't figure out what was happening up there. Why did they all become mute? Although the group of soul formation experts gradually came back to their senses, their eyes were filled with doubt. First, they doubted Hibiscus's identity. Second, when they saw Yu Qianqiu holding her hand, they doubted the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and her. Nongzhu revealed a sarcastic expression. Sure enough, evil people needed to be tempered by evil people. If it wasn't for Bai Changchun's iron-blooded methods, the cultivation world would have already turned upside down. Pei Fong, with a face full of fat, swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Suddenly, with a swoosh sound, he rushed between the two sides. The blue-faced demon knife quickly appeared in his hand and said to the people behind him in a righteous manner, "Brother Nongzhu, if you want to leave, go ahead. I, Pei Fong, am here. If anyone dares to stop you, they will have to go through me first." After saying that, he hurriedly shouted to Ouyangda and Qi Jiujuan, "Two brothers, quickly come and help me." The two behind him heard this and quickly flashed over. In the blink of an eye, one of them wore the deadly claws while the other used the sovereign descending ruler to wait for the enemy. The three of them stared at Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou like tigers watching their prey. They seemed to want to escort Nongzhu and the others away at all costs. The group of soul formation experts rolled their eyes. They had seen shameless people, but they had never seen someone as shameless as Fatty Pei. Moreover, there were two who were willing to be shameless with him. Did these three guys have the qualities of the top 10 experts? Even if they wanted to flatter, they shouldn't do it like this. They have that jade pendant, do they still need you to protect them? Would Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou dare to act recklessly? The most depressed ones were Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou. The two of them almost fainted from anger. Did we say that we were going to fight? These three guys actually took advantage of this situation to play this trick. It was fine if they wanted to flatter, but they also had the suspicion of confusing the public. It was as if the two of them were the murderers, and the three of them were sacrificing themselves to save the others. They were simply not afraid of making things worse. Imagine if the scene of this confrontation reached Bai Changchun's ears, that terrifying guy wouldn't even listen to an explanation. Once there was a misunderstanding, someone might die. They could be angry, but Pei Fong didn't care that much. It was not easy to come across such a good opportunity. If he didn't seize it, he would be letting himself down. As for whether or not someone would die, Pei Fong couldn't wait for someone to die, the more the better. It would be best if both Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou were dead. Furong didn't really understand the severity of the situation, but seeing that there were people who came to help at the critical moment, she immediately had a good impression of them. She weakly asked Yu Qianqiu, "That fatty and the other two are your friends? They're so nice." The moment these words came out, Pei Fong and the other two were immediately full of energy. Pei Fong in particular was grinning so widely that he couldn't even close his mouth. The fat on his face trembled as he turned around and said with a flattering smile, "He's a friend, a friend. From the first time I met Brother Yu, I've treated him as a bosom friend. If Brother Yu has any trouble in the future, don't hesitate to look for me. Alright, I am Pei Fong." Pei Fong, Senior Pei. Furong smiled like a flower and nodded, "I will remember you." Qi Jiujuan turned his head and said with a warm smile, "I am Qi Jiujuan." Ouyangda turned his head and said with an even more sincere smile, "I am Ouyangda." Furong solemnly nodded and said, "Senior Qi, Senior Ouyang." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched as he scratched his head. He didn't want to spoil Furong's mood. The greetings made the three of them so happy that they almost couldn't find the edge. Especially Pei Fong, he kept nodding his head happily and didn't seem to have any intention of confronting others. He was certain that the two behind him wouldn't dare to make a move. In the end, Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou were so angry that they almost vomited blood. It turned out that the two of them were the villains and these three were trying their best to reap benefits. However, they didn't dare to lose their temper at this time for fear of scaring the girl. Shameless. A group of soul formation stage lords looked down on these three fellows. They were too shameless. Ziyi could be considered as someone with some experience. She naturally knew who these people were. They were all top figures in the cultivation world. She also understood that it was all because of the jade pendant on Furong's waist. Thus, her admiration for Senior Bai soared again, and at the same time she was extremely envious of Furong. The group of cultivators who didn't know what was going on were completely confused. This scene was too strange. However, they weren't stupid. This woman was able to scare 5 late-stage spirit-severing experts at the same time, so her background was definitely not simple. Thus, everyone kept guessing Furong's background in their hearts. Yi Cheng, who was mixed in the crowd, was even more dumbfounded. He even suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. Chapter 653. Ignore them, let's go. Nongzhu waved her hand disdainfully. She didn't want to waste any more time with these shameless people. The four of them flew towards the passage of the treasure basin. The sky was quiet. Hu Changshou and Yin Baikong, who were shouting happily just now, remained silent as they watched them leave. Just as the four of them arrived at the passage of the treasure basin and were about to leave, a shrill laughter came from above, causing them to stop. Not only them but everyone in the cornucopia also raised their heads to look at the sky. Sure enough, there is a group of soul-forming cultivators. Looks like this is the place. A man in a green robe was muttering to himself as he stared at the ground with his arms crossed. Although his voice was soft, it was as clear as a thread into the ears of the people below. Logically speaking, the treasure basin was protected by a protective formation. Only the people inside could see what was happening outside, while the people outside could only see the clouds and mist below. However, the newcomer was able to discover a group of soul-forming cultivators, which was not simple at all. Yin Baikong, who was already angry, neglected this point. Instead, he flew into a rage and said, "Who is sneakily standing up there?" The newcomer was none other than the emissary from the underworld, Lu Mei, who was instructed by Yu Ji. Lu Mei, who was in the sky, was startled. Then he laughed in a shrill voice and said, "Are you talking to me? How arrogant. Let me see who it is." In fact, he didn't see the people below, but the people of the underworld were very sensitive to the strength of human auras in the mortal world. Moreover, the cultivation of the people below had not reached the level where they could hide their auras, so he was able to determine who it was from above. The man in the green robe suddenly turned into a ball of green light and effortlessly passed through the protective formation. Based on the sound, he floated in front of Yin Baikong and suddenly transformed back into his human form. A pair of green eyebrows slightly raised, and his small eyes looked up and down at Yin Baikong with disdain. Then he said in a shrill voice, "Were you the one who talked big to me just now?" Everyone was startled by him and quickly backed away. Especially Pei Fong and the other two who just ran out, they quickly moved away. One had to know that the cornucopia's defensive formation was personally set up by Yin Baikong, a late-stage deity transformation expert. Its defensive power was exceptionally strong, and even if an expert of Pei Fong's level were to force his way in, he would still cause quite a commotion. And this green-robed man who suddenly appeared actually broke in without a sound and effortlessly. In particular, the spell that could turn one's entire body into a ball of green light was something that he had never seen before. It was extremely strange. The most disturbing thing was that even with everyone's cultivation, they couldn't sense any life from this person. It was as if the person standing in front of them was a living dead. Coupled with a pair of green eyebrows and a deathly pale complexion, it gave off a feeling of extreme danger. Yin Baikong was startled and immediately calmed down from his previous anger. His body flashed and he quickly moved a safe distance away. He then cupped his hands and asked, "May I know who you are and what brings you here?" Green Eyebrows laughed and said, "How dare you? I asked you a question but you dare not to answer. I will ask you again, were you the one who was boasting shamelessly in front of me just now?" Yin Baikong's heart skipped a beat, but he still squeezed out a smile and cupped his hands, saying, "It was a misunderstanding just now. I didn't know you were an esteemed guest, so please forgive me for not going out to greet you." Since he couldn't figure out the other party's background, he could only feel wronged. It was better than losing his life. "It seems like you are a tactful person, it won't be difficult for me to forgive you." Green Eyebrows crossed his arms in front of his chest, and indifferently swept his gaze across the crowd, as if he was looking at a group of ants that he could trample at will. His gaze finally landed on Yin Baikong and he arrogantly said, "Kneel down and kowtow to apologize and I can spare your life." Once these words were spoken, the crowd was in an uproar. Someone actually wanted Yin Baikong to kowtow? The group of deity transformation experts looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know where this monster came from, but he was a bit too arrogant. The gloating expression on Pei Fong's face suddenly disappeared, and he exchanged glances with Qi Jiujuan and Ouyang Da, their eyes filled with seriousness. It was true that they couldn't wait for Yin Baikong to die, but Yin Baikong was, after all, one of the top 10 experts on the same level as them. Normally, no matter how much they targeted Yin Baikong, they wouldn't use such a method to humiliate him. If Yin Baikong really knelt down and kowtowed, it wouldn't just be him losing face but the top 10 experts as well. How would the cultivators of the world view the so-called top 10 experts in the future? At the entrance of the passage, Yu Qianzhou gave Nongzhu a questioning look, hoping to get an answer from the knowledgeable Nongzhu. In the end, Nongzhu slightly shook her head and transmitted her voice, "I have never seen such a person. I'm afraid Yin Baikong is out of luck." At this moment, even if Yu Qianzhou racked his brains, he wouldn't be able to think that this strange person was lured out by his deeds. Yin Baikong's expression greatly changed. If this was a place with no one around and he was forced into a corner, he might have compromised in order to save his life. But where was this place? This was the cornucopia of the World Commerce's headquarters. His disciples and grand-disciples were watching from below. How could he kneel? If he really was humiliated and knelt in front of everyone, even if he obtained the entire world in the future, he would never be able to raise his head. If he was an ordinary cultivator, then it wouldn't matter, but he was one of the top 10 experts. There were different types of humiliation, and some humiliation was more difficult to bear than death for experts. "Who are you? Aren't you being a little too overbearing?" Yin Baikong asked with an ashen face. He didn't know what kind of bad luck he had today. Why did bad things happen one after another? A mere mortal doesn't have the right to ask who I am. Lu Mei's tone was cold and threatening. "I'll give you one last chance. Are you going to kneel or not?" An icy aura slowly spread out, causing the surrounding temperature to plummet. He was indeed angry. In the underworld, he knelt in front of a woman every day, so he already had nowhere to vent his anger. He didn't expect that in the human world, a mortal cultivator would actually dare to contradict him. Immediately, killing intent spread in his heart. A mere mortal? Yin Baikong's pupils shrank. From the other party's aura, he sensed an aura similar to Niu Yu's, but it didn't seem to be as strong as Niu Yu's. He immediately asked, "Could it be that you're from the immortal world? I also have a friend in the immortal world called Niu Yu. Do you know him?" When a person was forced into a desperate situation, no matter what method he had, he would always try it. The moment these words came out, it could be said that everyone was shocked. Everyone was stunned. Niu Yu was actually from the immortal world? Everyone thought of Niu Yu's incomparably arrogant actions and immediately came to a realization. So he was from the immortal world. No wonder such a powerful expert suddenly appeared. No one knew his origin. However, everyone was more or less suspecting whether Yin Baikong's words were true or not. Nongzhu's face kept twitching. She stiffly turned around and rolled her dead fish eyes. She transmitted her voice to Yu Qianzhou. "Kid, what nonsense did you tell Yin Baikong to actually make him say such nonsense?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head with a sluggish expression. He really didn't know what to say. He could only silently say in his heart, "Brother Yin, take care." Lu Yanqing, who was in the air, stared at him with a complicated gaze. Lu Mei was slightly startled when she heard this. She asked in surprise, "You have a friend in the immortal world? What does Niu Yu do?" The immortal world had always been in contact with the underworld. However, his position and cultivation in the underworld wasn't high. He was just a dispensable clown under Madame Heiqi's feet. He wasn't familiar with the people in the immortal world at all. If this person's friend was someone important in the immortal world, then he wouldn't be able to provoke them. Even if he ran back to the underworld, they could still come to the immortal world to deal with him. Madame Heiqi wouldn't offend a big shot in the immortal world for a clown like him. If that happened, she would kick him away like a piece of trash, without the slightest bit of mercy. Seeing that the opponent's aura was slightly weakened, Yin Baikong cupped his hands and smiled. "My friend is the immortal world's emissary." Yu Qianzhou almost couldn't hold back his laughter when he heard this. Nongzhu glanced at him. She finally knew who this kid was pretending to be. It turned out that he was the emissary he mentioned before. Immortal world's emissary? Lu Mei's face was full of suspicion. The immortal world's emissary who goes to and from the immortal ascension stage in the human world? Yin Baikong's eyes lit up. It seemed that Niu Yu didn't lie to him. There really was such a person in the immortal world. He immediately cupped his hands and smiled. "That's right. He's the immortal world's emissary who goes to and from the immortal ascension stage in the human world." Lu Mei's pale face darkened. He said in a gloomy tone, "You dare to trick me? You actually used an emissary from the immortal world to fool me." He might not dare to provoke someone with a bit of status in the immortal world, but he wouldn't put a lowly immortal in his eyes. No matter how insignificant he was in the underworld, he was still a small character who had accompanied the dignified Madame Heiqi for a long time. Not everyone would dare to touch him when he went out. Not to mention this, his cultivation level was one level higher than that lousy emissary. Yin Baikong was shocked. He knew that he had overreached himself. He raised his hand in a panic, wanting to apologize. Who knew that Lu Mei would shout, "I gave you a chance to live but you didn't want it. You dare to trick me? Hand over your life." Yin Baikong was indeed someone who had been on the battlefield for a long time. Once he heard this, he knew that there was no room for negotiation. Without hesitation he teleported and disappeared on the spot. However, Lu Mei disappeared almost at the same time. Bang! A loud sound came from the sky, attracting everyone's attention. Two people appeared at the edge of the defensive formation at the same time. From the looks of it, it seemed like Yin Baikong wanted to teleport away, but his escape route was blocked by the other party. Before anyone could clearly see what was going on, they only saw a green light and a white light violently colliding. The powerful shockwave caused the spirit-severing experts in the air to fall down one after another. The airflow stirred up the dust, making everyone unable to open their eyes. The surrounding shops collapsed on the spot. Some of the Foundation establishment cultivators couldn't even stand steadily and were directly pushed to the ground by the strong airflow that was blowing towards them. Chapter 654. Nong Zhu's figure flashed and appeared in front of them. She quickly pushed out a wall of light with one palm, protecting the three people behind her. The sandstorm and debris were like shuttles, smashing against the wall of light with a pitter-patter. Even with Nong Zhu's help, Yu Qianqiu still subconsciously pulled Furong behind him and stared at the sky with a solemn expression. The green light and white light violently collided and separated. However, the green light remained stationary in the air, while the white light was quickly knocked back as if it had hit an iron wall. As soon as it was knocked back, the white light disappeared and a human figure was smashed down with a swoosh. Bang! The ground shook violently and in an instant, a deep pit was smashed out of the collapsed walls. Ah! A few cultivators with low cultivation were unable to dodge in time and were smashed into the pit. After letting out a miserable scream, there was no reaction. The green light in the air revealed its true form. Lu Mei stared at the ground and laughed cruelly. "Reckless thing, you still want to escape in front of me." Cough cough. A series of violent coughs came from the deep pit, and the coughs were heart-wrenching. Suddenly the coughs stopped, and the white light once again shone from the deep pit. A powerful aura rapidly rotated and spread out from the deep pit like a storm. The surrounding broken bricks and stones were swept away as if they were dry weeds and rotten wood. Before the crowd could react, a black figure with a dazzling white light quickly escaped from the deep pit. It seemed as if it wanted to split the void, emitting a dazzling light that pierced through the sky. Its target was Lu Mei, who was in the air. The onlookers were overwhelmed with emotions. Yin Baikong obviously knew that he couldn't escape, so he took the initiative to launch a powerful attack. Among the cultivators watching from below, there might have been many who scoffed at Yin Baikong's action of escaping. But now, who would dare to say that Yin Baikong, one of the top 10 experts in the world, was a coward who ran away? Xiao. The black figure with the cone-shaped white light emitted an ear-piercing sound of breaking through the air. It was like a divine arrow that was shot from a bow, breaking through thousands of kilograms. Everyone below had their hearts in their throats as they stared at Yin Baikong's all-out attack with wide eyes. Whether they had a grudge against him or not, they all hoped that he could defeat the enemy in one strike. "How dare you!" Lu Mei shouted in a shrill voice. With a swoosh, he charged towards the incoming white light. With a yes sound, he raised a huge palm shadow and slammed it down. Bang! The air exploded, the airflow rippled, and visible patterns spread out. The white light was instantly annihilated, and a black shadow crashed down at an even faster speed than before. More than half of the shops in the treasure basin collapsed in an instant. Bang! The ground shook and an even larger pit appeared. It's over. Yin Baikong is finished. This thought suddenly popped up in everyone's mind. It was quiet all around. Everyone stared at the newly created pit without blinking. There was no movement inside. Was he dead? The shrill laughter rose again. Green Eyebrows glanced at the crowd below and said, "Did you see that? This is the consequence of being disrespectful to me." Cough cough. The sudden sound of coughing interrupted his wild laughter. Green Eyebrows couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Staring at the figure crawling up from the deep pit below, he clicked his tongue and said, "Old thing, you're really tough. You're actually not dead yet?" Inside the deep pit, the black-robed Yin Baikong lowered his head and dragged his sword. He slowly walked out with heavy steps, and silently stood at the edge of the deep pit with his sword in hand. His black robe was already tattered and covered in dust. Blood could be seen flowing out from the wound underneath. Although he was old, his neatly combed hair was now loose and messy. Mixed with the dust, it was as messy as weeds on the roadside. Ah, ah. He slowly raised his head, and intermittent sounds came from his throat. Yin Baikong stubbornly stared at the sky, his eyes were still bright and full of expression. Suddenly, his chest heaved up and down and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he continued to stare at the sky, unwilling to lower his head. Master. 2 cries of alarm could be heard. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong teleported over with their swords in hand. They stretched out their hands to support Yin Baikong's arm. Don't touch me, I can't fall yet. I don't need anyone to support me. Yin Baikong shouted, and the 2 disciples' hands froze in fear. Green Eyebrows, who was crossing his arms in the air, shook his head and said with a mocking expression, even if he's not dead, he's not far from it. Is this your disciple? Old thing, this lord is being kind and will give you some time. If you have any last words, hurry up and say them. Ah! Sharp laughter echoed in the air. The resentment that had been suppressed for so long in the netherworld had finally found a place to vent, and he laughed very happily. It felt so good to be able to control the life and death of others at any time. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong stared at the sky with faces full of anger. Yin Baikong also revealed a sinister expression, but when he turned around and looked at the 2 accompanying disciples, he nodded his head with a gratified expression. These 2 disciples were not taken in for nothing. They still dared to stand out in such a dangerous moment. You 2 back down, this has nothing to do with you. Yin Baikong said in a deep voice. Master. Jing Yuankong's face was full of anxiety. Sikongju shook his head with a bitter smile. If anything happens to Master, even though the world is big, where can we brothers retreat to? What he said was the truth. The 2 brothers had worked for Yin Baikong and had offended countless people. If Yin Baikong died, how could others spare them? Yin Baikong's eyes turned scarlet red, and he stared at Pei Fong, who was in the crowd, and shouted angrily, Fatty Pei, you and I have fought for a lifetime, why don't we put an end to it today? Do you dare to come out and fight me? Pei Fong was speechless after being called out. He scratched his fat face and said with a bitter smile, Brother Yin, why do you have to do this? Look at the situation now. Say it, will you fight or not? Yin Baikong roared. I admit defeat. Pei Fong shrugged his shoulders helplessly and said with a bitter face, I know what you want to say. Don't worry. As long as your 2 disciples don't go against me in the future, I won't find trouble with them. As long as they don't take the initiative to cause trouble, I won't let others find trouble with them. Brother Yin, are you satisfied now? Yin Baikong chuckled and said, Fatty Pei, looks like you won't have a chance to win against me in this lifetime. If you don't accept it, I'll wait for you in the next life. Damn it. Pei Fong couldn't help but curse. He scratched his fat face and said, Fine, if there's a chance in the next life, we'll fight again. This life is yours. Ah. Yin Baikong laughed wildly. After hearing the conversation between the 2, the crowd couldn't help but sigh. Although they all knew that Yin Baikong didn't have a true friend in this lifetime, no one would have thought that the person he would entrust his funeral to was the enemy he had been fighting with for a lifetime. There was a good saying, the person who understood you the most was your enemy. After laughing wildly, Yin Baikong turned to his 2 disciples and said with a smile, If you still have me as your master in your heart, don't let my Yin family's bloodline end. As for the World Commerce Chamber, you won't be able to keep it. Let go when you need to. Otherwise, if Fatty Pei becomes jealous, his words will be treated as farts. Pei Fong rolled his eyes and didn't retort. At this time he couldn't be bothered to argue with him. Are you guys done talking? Lu Mei, who was floating in the air with his arms crossed, was getting impatient. Get out of the way. Yin Baikong shouted at his 2 disciples. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong were still hesitant, but when they saw their master's angry glare, they bit their lips and bowed, then resolutely turned around and left. Human fire. A commotion suddenly broke out in the surroundings. Yin Baikong straightened his back, his whole body was burning with a scorching white flame, and a suffocating aura slowly spread in all directions. Meanwhile, Yin Baikong's entire being was filled with energy and vigor. Nongju shook her head slightly and sighed softly, Yin Baikong is going to risk his life. Yu Qianzhou's expression was solemn. He could also see that this white flame was the human fire that only someone with a high cultivation base could ignite. Yin Baikong was clearly burning his powerful cultivation base, preparing to raise his attack power to the limit. Even if he could survive in the end at his age without the support of a powerful cultivation base, how long could he live? He was clearly throwing caution to the wind and had no intention of surviving. Yu Qianqiu sighed, "There are so many late divine transformation realm experts, is there no one who will help him?" Nongzhu sneered, "They are all old foxes knowing that they are no match for him who would still want to die. Moreover, he doesn't have a true friend." Sigh. Yin Baikong is also forced into a corner. You think he wants to? As he spoke, a protective aura quickly surged out from his body, expanding to envelop everyone. Ziyi and Furong looked at this scene in horror, the two of them tightly holding each other's hands. When Lu Mei saw this scene, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. He sneered, "Old thing, you really are tired of living, then I'll fulfill your wish." Although he said that, 2 1-meter-long green thorns suddenly appeared in his hands, flashing with a cold green light. Obviously he didn't dare to be too careless. "I refuse to accept this." Yin Baikong roared, the white flame on his body surged, and he disappeared on the spot with a whoosh. Boom. Immediately after, there was an explosion in the air, only to see the green thorn in Lu Mei's hand blocking a huge sword aura that had suddenly appeared. The sword aura was easily defeated by him. However, Yin Baikong was nowhere to be seen. Just as the sword aura was defeated, another sword aura appeared out of nowhere and slashed wildly. Lu Mei's reaction was extremely fast. The green thorn in his hand was defeated without any hesitation. However, the sword aura that followed became more and more frequent. There were huge sword shadows everywhere in the air, but Yin Baikong was nowhere to be seen. Boom boom. Explosions sounded continuously, gradually enveloping Lu Mei, and he wantonly slashed wildly. On the other hand, Lu Mei dealt with the attacks with ease, a disdainful sneer on his face. The battle became more and more intense, or more accurately, Yin Baikong's attacks became more and more intense, causing the weather to change. Bang bang bang. The protective formation of the treasure basin finally couldn't withstand the power of the two's battle anymore. The bottom of the formation exploded, and the entire protective formation completely collapsed. The cultivators below the soul formation stage were already unable to stand under the powerful pressure. The wind blades formed from the aftermath of the battle were as hard as steel. Some of the weaker cultivators were cut into pieces on the spot, their intestines spilling out. Immediately, many people fled in fear, quickly hiding behind the God of Wealth peak. Chapter 655. Yu Qianqiu stared at the sky and said with a frown, "What is Yin Baikong doing? Does he want to destroy the treasure that he built with his own hands? He is using teleportation to attack." Nongzhu sighed and said, "The strength gap between the two sides is too big. Only by constantly teleporting can he barely maintain his attacking posture. Otherwise, as you have seen before, he is not an opponent of the same level at all. In a head-on fight, he can't even resist one blow from his opponent." Could a soul formation final stage expert be able to teleport indefinitely? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled. He can't. That's why he ignited his cultivation and forced himself to use it. When he stops, he will be. Sigh. Nongzhu shook her head. It seems like this move is useless against him. The difference in strength is too big. Could he really be an immortal from the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He couldn't answer this question either. In the sky, the endless sword energy gradually decreased. The attacks that were as dense as rain were showing signs of weakening. The green spikes in Lu Mei's hands easily broke the incoming sword energy. Then he cackled, "I thought you were more capable than I thought. So this is all you've got? What? You can't hold on anymore? Useless." What answered him was the sudden appearance of a figure, wielding a sword with both hands and slashing at his head. Lu Mei casually waved his green thorn and easily destroyed it. He clicked his tongue and said, "Can't even withstand a single blow. Really can't withstand a single blow." After a few fruitless attacks, Yin Baikong stopped. He floated in the air and panted heavily. His eyes were lifeless as he stared at Lu Mei. His black robe had been dyed dark red by blood. Drops of blood dripped from the tips of his feet. His face was pale, comparable to Lu Mei's. The group of soul formation stage lords stared at the sky in silence. They all knew that Yin Baikong was finished. "Don't have the strength to spin anymore?" Lu Mei laughed. "If that's the case, I won't play with you anymore. Boring." As soon as he finished speaking, he shot his green thorn at Yin Baikong's chest. It was fast and silent. A beautiful green light flashed. Suddenly, Yin Baikong, who seemed to have lost the ability to retaliate, suddenly disappeared. Green thorn pounced on empty air. Green eyebrows pupils constricted. A streak of light suddenly appeared on his left. It was as dazzling as the Milky Way, and it was like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. It was incredibly fast and almost reached his neck in the blink of an eye. This was the fastest sword strike Yin Baikong had ever unleashed in his entire life. His lifetime of cultivation and comprehension were all condensed into this single strike. It was soundless, yet it contained a powerful destructive power. He was prepared to finish the battle in one fell swoop. Even if he couldn't kill all of them, he had to teach them a lesson. The group of spirit-severing stage experts below suddenly became spirited. So it turned out that Yin Baikong was still hiding a trump card, purposely acting weak to make the opponent careless. As long as the opponent's reaction was even the slightest bit careless, it would be very difficult for them to escape this sword. At the very least, none of them believed that they would be able to dodge this sword strike. This was a sword strike that Yin Baikong had ignited his cultivation base. Even when Lan Feng, who had been silent all this while, had a trace of amazement in his eyes, or perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as shock. However, it was this stunning strike that missed. It had clearly struck the opponent's throat, but it turned out that it had struck an afterimage. Yin Baikong's body froze in the air. The God of Wealth sword that had followed him for many years shot into the distant horizon. After it left his hand, the silver streak of light brought with it the sound of thunder and wind as it disappeared into the distance. Its final destination was unknown. Who knew if it would be fated to continue its fate with its master in the future? Green Eyebrow stood behind Yin Baikong. A green thorn in her hand had pierced through Yin Baikong's back, through his chest, and pierced through his heart. A section of the green thorn protruded from his chest, and beads of blood dripped down. Yin Baikong's pupils gradually dilated and lost their luster. Master? On the God of Wealth peak, Sikongju and Jing Yuankong cried out involuntarily. The disciples of the World Commerce Association emerged one by one and looked at the scene in the sky in a daze. Sorrowful expressions emerged on their faces as they silently muttered in their hearts. The era of the World Commerce Association is over. The group of soul formation experts looked up at the sky, and they all had expressions of sympathy on their faces. Nong Zhu and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other. No one could have imagined that the high-spirited Yin Baikong who was preparing for the cornucopia gathering would be finished just like that. Old ghost, you're still lacking if you want to scheme against me. Don't you know how to act a little better? Your biggest flaw is that you can still float in the air. Green Eyebrow's mouth was close to Yin Baikong's ear as he laughed sinisterly. Suddenly Yin Baikong's dilated pupils shrank and a trace of a desolate smile flashed across his face. His hands suddenly hugged the person behind him tightly. The smile on Green Eyebrow's face froze as he cried out in surprise, "Old thing you, boom?" An earth-shattering explosion drowned out Green Eyebrow's cry. A bright light exploded in the sky, and the air in this area seemed to be scared away in an instant, and Nong Zhu let out a fierce snort as the protective aura she released was instantly blasted apart by the powerful explosive airflow. Fortunately, Ziyi's reaction speed was not slow. Almost at the same time when Nong Zhu's protective aura was blasted apart, her protective aura came up again. Fortunately, although Nong Zhu's protective aura was blasted apart, it was enough to offset the remaining power of the explosion. If it wasn't for Ziyi's protective aura, the four of them would have been covered in dust. Among the group of spirit-severing experts below, except for a few spirit-severing experts in the late stage, everyone else's protective aura was blasted apart. However, it was not a big deal. After all, the experts who could become lords of a territory all had similar cultivation as Nong Zhu. However, they did not have Ziyi by their side, so they were all covered in dust. However, no one cared about this now. They all stared at the sky dumbfoundedly. Unfortunately, the dust was everywhere and no one had the ability to see through it. No one would have thought that Yin Baikong's trump card actually had a hidden move behind it. He had stored a large amount of true essence to self-destruct his Dantian. A late-stage spirit-severing expert was indeed a late-stage spirit-severing expert. After consuming a large amount of true essence, he still had such a powerful self-destructibility. Fortunately, the true essence in Yin Baikong's body had already been greatly consumed. Otherwise, the self-destruction of a late-stage spirit-severing expert would not be a joke. It was estimated that many mid-stage spirit-severing experts would more or less suffer some injuries. While everyone was feeling emotional, they were all guessing what happened to the green-robed man. Guessing was just guessing. No one went up to check. Pei Fong, who was inside the protective aura, had a twitch on his chubby face. He muttered absent-mindedly, "Didn't you promise me to settle the score in your next life? You've already self-destructed. You don't even have the chance to reincarnate. What next life are you talking about? Yin Baikong. Yin Bai Kong. You are indeed worthy of your title as an old fox. Even when you're *king committing suicide, you still have a hidden move. I admire you. Everyone knew that this time Yin Bai Kong was really dead. He was completely dead. It was estimated that not even a piece of him could be found. Another one of the top 10 experts in the cultivation world had fallen. The dust gradually dispersed. At this moment, the god of wealth peak behind everyone suddenly let out a loud rumble. The ground shook continuously. Everyone turned their heads to look. It turned out that due to the impact of the explosion, half of the god of wealth peak had collapsed from top to bottom. There was still half of it standing there. It was an indescribably strange sight. The Hall of Wealth, on top, was still there. There was also that ancient pine tree. This was all thanks to Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong's combined efforts. It was as if they had risked their lives to keep these two items on the god of wealth peak. As if sensing the disappearance of its owner, even the god of wealth peak was crying in a collapsing manner. With Yin Bai Kong's death, it was unknown whether the enormous world commerce that he had single-handedly founded would continue to exist in the cultivation world. With Yin Bai Kong's death, it was unknown whether cornucopia would be rebuilt and restored to its former glory. Although the dilapidated god of wealth peak still stood tall, the black-robed old man who had stood under the pine tree for over 1,000 years and often stroked the rough tree trunk while gazing at the sea of clouds would no longer appear. Many people present would remember the voice and appearance of this old fox who would rather die than submit because of this self-destruction. Yu Qianqiu let out a light sigh. He didn't know what to say. Actually, Yin Bai Kong's death was beneficial to him. At least no one would pursue the relationship between him and the elixir. However, why did he feel that Yin Bai Kong's death was a little hard to accept? Was it too sudden? It was hard to explain. Hee. Old ghost, you think you can scheme against me like this? You're really an ant trying to shake a tree. You overestimate yourself. A sharp and sinister laughter came from the sky, causing everyone to turn pale with fright. They saw a transparent green ball floating in the sky where the dust had dispersed. The green-robed man was standing inside, safe and sound. That green ball was obviously something similar to a protective aura. It actually blocked Yin Bai Kong's self-destruction. Too strong. Everyone had this thought. They didn't expect that Yin Bai Kong's self-destruction wouldn't injure him in the slightest. He was really too strong. The green ball disappeared and green eyebrows landed on the ground in a flash. With his hands behind his back, he looked at everyone indifferently, as if he was looking at a group of ants. His gaze suddenly landed on Pei Fong, whose body was very conspicuous. He stretched out his hand and beckoned with his finger. You, come out, I have something to ask you. A trace of panic flashed across Pei Fong's face. He wasn't necessarily stronger than Yin Bai Kong. Thus, he tried his best to shrink his body, trying to shrink as much as possible. Then he pretended to look around as if he didn't know who he was calling. However, everyone's gaze was fixed on him. Little fatty, I'm talking about you. Green eyebrows proudly pointed at Pei Fong and said. Pei Fong knew that he couldn't hide anymore. If he knew that this matter would involve him, he wouldn't have stayed and watched the show. He squeezed out a smile on his fat face and walked out. He cupped his hands and said, I'm Pei Fong. What orders do you have for me? Don't be afraid. Green eyebrows casually waved his hand. He seemed to enjoy the feeling of someone trembling in front of him. He was in a good mood as he said to Pei Fong, Fatty Pei, let me ask. Oh, how did you know that my nickname is Fatty Pei? Pei Fong curiously tried to establish a relationship. Green eyebrows was stunned. His expression returned to normal as he said, Nonsense. Your surname is Pei and you're a fatty. If I don't call you Fatty Pei, what should I call you? Pei Fong didn't seem to realize that he was being scolded. Instead, he revealed an almost exaggerated expression of reverence and said in a flattering manner, You are indeed an expert. You can even think of such a question. You really have a divine plan. Chapter 656. Lu Mei looked at him in surprise and found that this guy's flattery was as good as his. But the feeling of being flattered and being flattered were two completely different things. He enjoyed it very much. But the group of lords at the spirit-severing stage had goosebumps all over their bodies. A dignified late spirit-severing expert actually behaved like this. It was like heaven and earth compared to Yin Bai Kong, who would rather die than submit. But they just felt uncomfortable and didn't mean to look down on him. How many of them hadn't experienced bowing and scraping before? They just didn't fawn as disgustingly as Pei Fong. Fatty Pei cut the crap. Although Lu Mei said so, there was a trace of appreciation in his eyes. Let me ask you, who here is called Bai Changchun? His eyes fell on Wenlan Feng, Hu Changsho, Ouyangda, and Qi Jiujuan. These four were the ones with the highest cultivation. Ah! Pei Fang screamed and then asked hesitantly, You are looking for Bai Changchun? To be exact, he was startled, and so were the others. Even if the person in front of them might be from the immortal world, it didn't seem to be more frightening than Bai Changchun. After all, Bai Changchun's despotic power had suppressed them for so many years that they were all scared to the bone. Everyone looked at each other. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other. Who was this person? Why did he come here to look for Bai Changchun? Was Bai Changchun also in contact with people from the immortal world? Lu Mei narrowed his eyes and took in everyone's reaction. He smiled and said, It seems that Bai Changchun is here. Who is Bai Changchun? Come out and answer me. The surroundings were quiet and no one dared to say anything. Then again, after being suppressed by Bai Changchun for so many years, who dared to talk about Bai Changchun in front of so many people? After waiting for a while, no one spoke. Lu Mei's green eyebrows trembled and he sneered, Fatty Pei, point out to me who is Bai Changchun. Pei Fang was shocked. Whether it was Bai Changchun or this strange green-robed man, he couldn't afford to offend them. He didn't know if these two were friends or enemies, but from the way they spoke, it was more likely that they were enemies. It was better to figure it out before dealing with them. Thus, with a face full of smiles, he nodded and bowed as he asked, May I know why you are looking for Bai Changchun? If someone else had asked a question instead of replying, Green Eyebrow would have been unhappy. However, Pei Fang's respectful attitude made him feel comfortable. He snorted coldly and said, Bai Changchun, you destroyed the gate to the underworld and angered the underworld emperor. He sent me here to punish you. Why do you think I'm looking for him? It was so quiet that one could hear the chirping of birds in the distant forest and the gentle breeze. Everyone was stunned. Bai Changchun had actually reached the legendary underworld gate and even destroyed it? The number one expert in the world was indeed the number one expert in the world. He was too bold to actually dare to mess with the netherworld. As a result, even the legendary emperor of the underworld was alerted, and this person was actually an emissary from the underworld? No wonder it was so powerful. Nongzhu rolled her dead fish eyes and slowly tilted her head to stare at Yu Qianqiu. The latter's face twitched as he smiled embarrassedly. Now the two completely understood. It turned out that the destruction of the underworld gate had attracted this god of plague. Yin Baikang's death was a little unjust. Bai Changchun was also wronged. But what Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure out was why the other party didn't look for him, the culprit, but his master. He looked at Nongzhu with an inquiring look. Nongzhu transmitted her voice with extreme disdain, No need to guess. It must be the trouble caused by the words left on the wall of the underworld cave. Otherwise, no matter how famous your master is, the people of the underworld wouldn't know his name. When you go back, quickly erase the words on the wall for me. It seemed that having bad handwriting had its benefits. At least it wasn't that easy to recognize. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. Pei Fang had a dull expression on his face. He really didn't know what to say. But Green Eyebrow wouldn't let him get away with it. He asked again, Fatty Pei, who is Bai Changchun? Point it out to me or else. Pei Fang's face was bitter and he was almost crying. He wanted to test whether the strange green-robed man was Bai Changchun's friend or foe. If it was a friend, he would naturally tell the truth. If it was an enemy, he could also tell the truth. It would be great if he could get rid of Bai Changchun with the help of the strange green-robed man. Bing Qingzi ran away and Yin Baikang died. If Bai Changchun, who was above him, also died, he would be very comfortable in the future. But he never thought that Bai Changchun would dare to provoke the underworld. This was a little too ridiculously strong. In this case, if Bai Changchun and the strange green-robed man fought, it was still uncertain who would win. But if Bai Changchun won, how could he let go of the informant? If he lied, the green-robed man would definitely get even with him. It was difficult. The group of lords of the soul formation stage also looked at him with sympathy. They could all understand his feelings. Do you want me to force you to say it? Green Eyebrow was a little impatient. Pei Fang had no other choice. He had to get through this first. He was just telling the truth. Bai Changchun shouldn't be so petty, right? He coughed and said with a wry smile, It's not that I don't want to point it out, but Bai Changchun isn't here at all. Bai Changchun is the world's number one expert. He lives in the demon domain all year round. Why would he hang out with small figures like us? His words were very respectful to Bai Changchun. He completely had an attitude of not offending either side. The world's number one expert? No wonder he dares to say that he's invincible in the world. Green Eyebrow sneered. Suddenly he was startled and his eyes flickered. You said Bai Changchun lives in the demon domain? He remembered that the female ghost cultivator had said that the place shrouded by the dark clouds was the demon domain. That's right. Pei Fong explained. Bai Changchun is the world's #1 expert. He leads the thousands of demon kings and ghost king in the entire demon domain. He is the master of the demon domain. Hee. Green Eyebrow suddenly laughed sharply. He understood everything and instantly said with a murderous expression, so he is the master of the demon domain. No wonder that female ghost cultivator dared to lie to me. When I go back, the first person I'll deal with is you, bitch. I'll let you know what it means to beg for death. As soon as he finished speaking, his whole body turned into a green light and flew away. Seeing him leave just like that, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at the messy treasure bowl, everyone was speechless. However, at this moment, another green light flashed in the sky and turned into a human figure. Who else could it be but the strange green-robed man who had just left? Why did he come back? When everyone's heart was pounding, Green Eyebrow pointed to Pei Fong, who was surprised, and said, Fatty Pei, let me ask you again. Who are Nanhai Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu? Where do these two people live? Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were stunned when they heard this. Now they were 100% sure that it was the words left on the ghost cave that caused the trouble. Both of them were blaming their own hands and their hearts. Yu Qianqiu wanted to slip away immediately. He said to Nongzhu, let's go. While he doesn't know who we are, let's go quickly. Nongzhu agreed. The two of them grabbed Ziyi and Furong and wanted to run away. Stop. With a sharp shout, Green Eyebrow's eyes locked directly on them. There was no other reason. When he said that, everyone subconsciously turned to look at them. Their eyes betrayed them. The four of them paused and slowly turned around. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu had the same bright and harmless smile on their faces, but Ziyi and Furong were obviously very afraid. Green Eyebrow pointed at them and said, come here. Yu Qianqiu secretly transmitted his voice to the three of them. Don't be afraid. I'm here. He can't do anything to us. Follow me closely. Don't be too far away from me. When the critical moment comes, I have a way to help you escape. Damn it. Brat, why are you still pretending to be mysterious at a critical moment? I know you're good at escaping. If you want to escape, you should do it now. Why are you waiting for the critical moment? If you wait any longer, I'll be scared to death. Hurry up. Nongzhu secretly transmitted his voice and urged. Yu Qianqiu didn't bother to pay attention to him. He wouldn't reveal his last secret unless it was absolutely necessary. Then, he held Furong's hand and gave her a firm look that said, trust me. When Furong saw that, she was relieved. She didn't even want to think about it and believed him without any reason. Quietly, she was led away by him by the hand. Bastard, I'll deal with you later. Nongzhu secretly transmitted his voice and complained. But she had no choice. With her cultivation, she couldn't escape with Ziyi at all. She could only place her last hope on Yu Qianqiu. So, she pulled Ziyi and followed closely behind Yu Qianqiu. When the four of them came in front of Lu Mei, Yu Qianqiu squeezed Furong's hand and let go. He cupped his hands and said, may I know why Lord Envoy of Hell is looking for us? Lu Mei glanced at Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly her pupils shrank. She realized that she couldn't see through his cultivation. She was secretly shocked. She slowly turned to Pei Fong and asked, who are the four of them? Pei Fong looked at Furong and stuttered. He didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu quickly changed the topic. He smiled and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Lord Envoy of Hell is looking for Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu? I know where they are. Everyone looked at each other suspiciously. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. However, they admired his courage. He wasn't afraid at all in the face of such a terrifying monster. Lu Mei looked at his calm face and became more and more suspicious. Why didn't he notice the four people in the corner at the beginning? Oh, he said, then tell me where they are. I don't have time to talk nonsense here. He was in a hurry to leave. Although he was arrogant before, he had accumulated the mentality of a small person over the years. It couldn't be changed so easily. He instinctively thought that this person was not afraid of him at all. In addition, he couldn't see through his cultivation, so he was more or less afraid. What kind of person was Yu Qianqiu? In his previous life, he had mingled with the nobodies in the marketplace. It could be said that he was very familiar with the mentality of those nobodies. He could tell at a glance what kind of character the other party was. He was a coward. Now that he had a way to protect himself, his face turned cold. He slowly put his hands behind his back. He stared at Lu Mei and walked toward her step by step. Chapter 657. Boy, do you want to die? What do you want to do? Nongzhu transmitted her voice anxiously. Everyone else was also looking at Yu Qianqiu with the same thoughts in their minds. Yu Qianqiu ignored him. In his previous life he had made a name for himself among all sorts of people. Even though he was a hoodlum and his nature was hard to change, the aura of a superior was not something that could be faked. Lu Mei was also a man who acted according to the situation. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that this person's aura was not ordinary. Seeing him approaching step by step, he felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. He wanted to step back subconsciously, but he forced himself to hold back. He said in a low voice, "What do you want to do?" 2 meters away from him, Yu Qianqiu stopped. If he went forward, he would force Lu Mei to do something desperate, and then he would be exposed. As long as he kept a safe distance from Lu Mei, everything would be fine. "Do you really want to know where Yu Qianqiu and Nanhai Nongzhu are?" Yu Qianqiu asked coldly. The black fire in his body instantly condensed to the extreme, and suddenly pressed down on Lu Mei. Others naturally could not feel the targeted pressure. Unexpectedly, Lu Mei did not react at all. Yu Qianqiu thought it was bad. Then he remembered that since Lu Mei came from the underworld, he must have crossed the fire sea of the underworld and was not afraid of the black fire at all. He was right, but Lu Mei was not afraid at all. Such a heavy death chi could only be felt by people at the level of underworld sage. As a netherworld knight, he could not condense such a heavy death chi. What scared him the most was that he saw 2 burning black flames jumping in Lu Mei's eyes. However, as Yu Qianqiu quickly restrained the black fire, the 2 burning black flames disappeared again. It was indescribably weird. Lu Mei intuitively thought that Lu Mei's cultivation was higher than his, and it was very likely that he also came from the underworld. His heart was pounding. However, he soon realized that something was wrong. The human aura around the other party was very heavy. It was obvious that he was someone from the human world. If they were from the underworld, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. He was the messenger of the underworld emperor and Lady He Qi, who in the underworld dared to make things difficult for him? Even if they were from the celestial world, they still had to respect the emperor of the underworld and Lady Blackpool. But that's not right. People from the celestial realm don't have human qi. That's strange. Amidst his doubts, he calmed himself down and nodded. "I can tell that you aren't an ordinary person. I'm here by the order of the underworld emperor and the decree of the Lady of Blackpool. I hope you can cooperate with me and tell me the information about those 2 people." The politeness of his tone almost made the group of people's eyeballs fall out of their sockets. The title of this sovereign had also changed to this envoy. Nongzhu was even more stunned. It turns out that this strange green-robed man is easily frightened. He only bullies the weak and fears the strong. Ziyi's face was filled with admiration. However, Farong didn't think it was a big deal. He had always believed that Yu Qianqiu was the best. Seeing him like this, Yu Qianqiu finally felt more at ease. It seemed that the other party still had some scruples about the black fire. Otherwise, his attitude wouldn't have changed so quickly. What he didn't know was that the other party didn't have scruples about the black fire at all. He didn't even think about the black fire. Instead, he was worried about the vigorous dead qi and thought that Farong was a master. In fact, if Yu Qianqiu used the blue fire, the other party would really be afraid. Although the power of the blue fire was not as powerful as the black fire or the legendary purple fire, it was still a raging fire of extreme yang. It was the natural nemesis of the underworld cultivators. Ghost cultivators or meditation cultivators with low cultivation couldn't resist the blue fire at all. They would be burned to death immediately. The power of the earth fire in his body could make the ghost king Meng Yan have a hard time resisting it. Not to mention the blue fire of the 3 true fire, which could be said to be the nemesis of the underworld. Some things were so strange. People thought they couldn't play any role, but in fact they were very useful. Everything in the world usually had a fixed number. It was the truth that one thing could subdue another. Everything had its own value. As the saying went, lonely yin couldn't grow and lonely yang couldn't grow. One's loss and the other's gain. The operation of the way of heaven was called balance. Whoever broke the balance would be punished by the way of heaven in order to maintain the balance. "So you were sent by the emperor of the underworld and Madame He Qi. Sorry for not recognizing you." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands as if he had heard of the emperor of the underworld and Madame He Qi. However, he had heard of the emperor of the underworld. It was estimated that there were very few people in the cultivation world who hadn't heard of him. As for Madame He Qi, who the hell knew who she was? LV Mei was emboldened. "So what if your cultivation is high? Do you dare to disrespect the emperor of the underworld and Madame He Qi?" But he still cupped his hands and said, Please tell me the whereabouts of those two people. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, I can tell you, but I'm afraid that you can't get in even if you find the place. I advise you to give up the idea of looking for those two people. Even he said so. Could it be a very powerful place? LV May was taken aback. Then he shook his head and said, It doesn't matter. As long as I try my best, I have a clear conscience. His words sounded nice, but in fact he had already made up his mind. If it was a powerful place, he wouldn't have to look for those two people. He just wanted to find Bai Changchun and get back the stolen things. The most important thing now was to finish this formality and leave as soon as possible. He didn't want to talk nonsense with this strange guy. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed with a smile, saying, Go straight to the east, fly over the land, and then cross the vast sea. There is a vast land sealed by a great formation. Few people can enter it. It is called the East Holy Land. There are many highly skilled swordsmen there. Even my cultivation is not worth mentioning there. Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu are there. Then he cupped his hands and said, I wish you good luck, emissary of hell. Hearing this, Nongzhu's eyes brightened. She realized that this was a good way to solve the problem once and for all. Tricking him to go to a place where he couldn't enter, he naturally wouldn't be angry. At that time he would have to go back to the underworld obediently. The two of them didn't have a deep hatred with the underworld. Would the underworld have to find them? Impossible. That would be too degrading. Nongzhu didn't believe that the legendary emperor of the underworld was so petty. But he was worried about Bai Changchun. But there was no other way. He would save as many people as he could. He could only do this for the time being. The group of demigod lords nodded secretly and exchanged glances. This method was much better than Pei Fang's flattering method. But to them, if something happened to Bai Changchun, it might not be a bad thing. Only Ziyi thought of big liar, again. Pei Fang's face darkened. Why didn't he think of this method in the beginning? This so-called emissary of hell obviously knew nothing about the human world. He was very easy to trick. Thinking of his fawning manner and comparing it to Yu Qianqiu's calm and confident manner, he immediately felt a little embarrassed. It would be embarrassing if this spread out. He was a master at the final stage of demigod realm. He was not even as calm as a junior. He couldn't understand why this emissary of hell seemed to be afraid of Yu Qianqiu. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and was slightly stunned. He couldn't see through his cultivation. Was this the reason? Green Eyebrows was stunned for a while. After hearing Yu Qianqiu's words, he felt that safety was the first priority. He was already prepared to not look for them. He couldn't lose his life just because he came to the human world. Anyway, Mrs. Blackpool didn't know who Nanhai Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were. He cupped his hands and said, Thank you for telling me. Goodbye. Yu Qianqiu also cupped his hands and said with a smile, I won't see you out. However, just when everyone thought that the strange green-robed man was about to leave, they suddenly saw the strange green-robed man's face sink. His eyes suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu, and he said in a stern voice filled with killing intent, What's your name? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He didn't know where he had exposed himself, but he replied calmly, I'm Zhang San. Is there a problem? I think you're Li Si. How dare you make fun of me? How dare you? Green Eyebrows screamed. Damn it. He also knew the legend of Zhang San and Li Si. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know how the other party found out the flaw, he knew that he had been exposed. When he was about to release his divine sense to take Nanhai Nongzhu and the other two away, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Wen Lanfeng. Green Eyebrows screamed, It seems that there are many people who want to die. Wen Lanfeng held the giant silver sword in his hand, and his body glowed with monstrous fighting intent. Even the wind around him was stirred up. His long hair fluttered in the wind and he said without looking back, I'm here. Nanhai Nongzhu, take them away. If I die, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the Wen clan. His indomitable killing intent was surging. The second strongest man in the world knew that he was no match for him, but he still wanted to risk his life. If it weren't for the fact that the situation was unclear and he was worried that no one would protect Lu Yanqing, he wouldn't have watched Yin Baikong die like that. Lu Yanqing wanted to save Yin Baikong several times, but he forced her to stop. For him, Lu Yanqing's safety was the most important thing. Now that he found that the green-robed man wouldn't harm others for no reason, Lu Yanqing should be fine. Seeing that even a junior like Yu Qianqiu could face it bravely, and he had promised to take care of Yu Qianqiu in front of Bai Changchun, how could he stay out of it now that Yu Qianqiu was in danger? To be able to stand at the peak of the cultivation world, who didn't have a sense of pride in their hearts. They fought and fought, but they were unwilling to submit to others. No matter how cunning and selfish Yin Baikong was, he would rather die than submit at the critical moment. That magnificent feat of self-detonating his dantian had made Wen Lanfeng's blood boil, and he almost couldn't suppress it. Now that it was time to fulfill his promise to Bai Changchun, he stood up without hesitation. Even if he died, he would fight for his reputation, for his dignity. He didn't want to hide like a turtle and let that woman look down on him. Wen Lanfeng? Nanhai Nongzhu and Lu Yanqing shouted almost at the same time, and their tone was very anxious. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. It seemed that he had to bring 2 more people with him, and 2 more people would know his secret. Just as he released his divine sense, there was suddenly a sonorous hum that sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. It was cold and arrogant, and it shook people's hearts. Yu Qianqiu's legs went soft and he almost couldn't stand still. Chapter 658. Yu Qianqiu was just about to curse that scary bastard in his heart, but he suddenly felt something was wrong. The voice was so familiar. He turned around and saw a man standing on the edge of the collapsed God of Wealth peak, which was as if it had been cut by a knife or an axe. The man stood upright, with his green robe fluttering gently in the wind. With his cultivation, although he couldn't see the man's face clearly, he was too familiar with his majestic and arrogant standing posture. And that signature green robe? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The old guy came out of the mountain. In fact, he was not the only one who was scared by the cold snort. Many of the low-level cultivators hiding behind the God of Wealth peak were so scared that they even fell down on the spot, with their ears buzzing. As for the group of deity transformation stage lords, their hearts trembled when they heard that cold snort, which sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. It was not the first time they heard it. Every time they heard it, what happened next was extremely terrifying. Everyone looked up at the top of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu couldn't see it clearly, but the cultivators of the deification stage saw it clearly. They were all horrified. It was really Bai Changchun. He actually came here. Nongzhu was shocked and murmured, "Why is he here? It's going to be interesting." Ziyi's knuckles turned pale, but she was very excited and her eyes were shining. It turned out that Elder Bai, whom she admired the most, was here. Now, someone was going to teach that green-robed monster a lesson. She was very confident in Bai Changchun. In her eyes, Elder Bai was an invincible legend. LV Mei was not a fool. From everyone's reaction, he could tell that the guy who stood on the top of the mountain and looked into the distance without even looking at them was definitely not an ordinary person. Especially the cold snort just now, his cultivation must be extraordinary. Then he called, "Fatty Pei." Pei Fong made a sound of, "Ah," and turned around to look at him. LV Mei glanced at the God of Wealth peak coldly and asked, "Who is that old guy up there? Please use your brain, who else could it be?" Pei Fong shook his head with a bitter smile and did not answer. Wen Lanfeng, who was confronting Lu Mei, lost his surging battle intent and killing intent. He said to Lu Mei indifferently, "He's the one you're looking for, the world's #1 expert, Bai Changchun." Bai Changchun was here. There was no need for him to risk his life to protect Yu Qianqiu and the others. Bai Changchun? Green Eyebrows was startled and suddenly stared at the peak of the mountain. He smiled evilly and said, "You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search only to find it by chance." He actually sent himself to his death. That's good, it saves me the trouble of looking for him everywhere. When Lanfeng sneered, "Don't speak too early. I hope you still have a chance to return to the netherworld." He was the only person in the cultivation world who had survived from Bai Changchun's hands twice, so he naturally knew how terrifying Bai Changchun was. The God of Wealth sword? It's Yin Baikong's God of Wealth sword. How could it be in his hands? The soul formation experts suddenly became restless. Bai Changchun, who was on the God of Wealth peak, slowly put down his hands. He was holding a sword in his hand and silently looked at it with a solemn expression. This sword was extremely familiar to all of the soul formation final stage cultivators, especially Pei Fong and the other soul formation final stage cultivators. They were certain that the sword in Bai Changchun's hand was the God of Wealth sword that had followed Yin Baikong for many years. Everyone immediately came to a realization. Yin Baikong's God of Wealth sword was in the direction of the demon domain. Bai Changchun must have encountered it on his way here and brought it back. On the God of Wealth peak, Sikongju and Jing Yuankong were frightened by Bai Changchun's sudden appearance. Only now did they realize that the sword in Bai Changchun's hand was actually their master's sword. The two of them looked at each other and quickly walked behind Bai Changchun. They knelt down and kowtowed with sobs. "Senior Bai, please avenge our master, Senior Bai." Beside the cliff, the mountain wind was strong. However, the green robe that was fluttering in the wind suddenly stopped. It was as if it was made of stone and iron. It was as if it was connected to its owner's emotions. Bai Changchun faced heaven and earth quietly. His unmoving thin back didn't turn around. His back was facing the two people who were kneeling down. His face was as calm as water and no expression could be seen. A sharp gleam flashed across his eyes and then they became calm again. His eyes seemed to be uninterested in anything. He only stared at the god of wealth in his hand and said indifferently, "I was right. Otherwise you wouldn't have abandoned your sword." His voice was like that of an ordinary old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. It was quiet, indifferent, serene and unperturbed. Hearing this voice, no one would believe that this was the #1 expert whose name shook the cultivation world. "Junior is useless and can't avenge my master. Please avenge my master, Senior Bai." Sikongju kowtowed once again. This time he was kowtowing heavily on the ground, causing the ground to produce loud bangs. Jing Yuankong kowtowed non-stop along with his senior brother. Among the cultivators who were hiding behind the God of Wealth peak, many of them had heard the conversation. After holding their breaths and concentrating, someone suddenly exclaimed, Bai Changchun is here. The #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun is here. I heard his voice. There was an indescribable surprise in his tone. The news spread quickly behind the mountain, making the cultivators extremely excited. This caused the large group of cultivators to become extremely excited. They did not expect that the elusive #1 expert under the heavens would come and see them. Although they hadn't seen Bai Changchun before, they didn't know where they got the confidence that Bai Changchun would be able to take care of that arrogant green-robed man. It didn't matter if that green-robed man was from the celestial world or the netherworld world. They believed that Bai Changchun would win. To them, the name Bai Changchun was an undefeatable legend in the cultivation world. He was an immortal legend that only existed in legends. He was a monumental monument that no one in the cultivation world could surpass in the past or the future. Ever since they stepped into the cultivation world, they had heard of such a person. He was ethereal and mysterious and they could never see his true appearance. But every single person they met who talked about this legendary figure had a face full of reverence and sincerity. Over time, this legendary name was engraved in every cultivator's heart, accompanying every cultivator as they grew. That was a legendary figure that every cultivator dreamed of meeting since they stepped into the cultivation world. They tossed and turned restlessly in bed, longing to meet him, but today that legendary immortal legend didn't disappoint everyone. Just at the critical moment when the underworld messenger was acting arrogantly in the mortal world, he was like a rising sun in the darkness, appearing just in time and giving everyone hope. No matter what kind of enmity everyone had, when faced with bullying and oppression from the outside world, they would always feel a sense of solidarity against a common enemy. Especially those disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce, they hoped that someone could help them vent their hatred. They were perturbed and uneasy. They really wanted to meet that immortal legend. If they missed this opportunity, they would probably never be able to eat or sleep in peace for the rest of their lives. But at this time they were more or less afraid. Could they go out? But at this time, someone took the lead and threw caution to the wind. One person flew up with a swoosh, circled around God of Wealth Peak, and quickly landed on the edge of the mountain surrounding Cornucopia with his heart thumping wildly. With someone taking the lead, countless figures flew out from behind God of Wealth Peak like locusts, landing on the edge of the mountain surrounding Cornucopia one after another. Each of them were so excited that their gazes jumped around, desperately trying to see that immortal legend on God of Wealth Peak. But with their cultivation almost no one could see clearly. They could only faintly see a green-robed man standing upright on the mountain peak, but unfortunately they couldn't see his appearance clearly. Is that the green-robed man? It should be. I saw him too. Although no one could see clearly, that green-robed figure gave everyone incomparably strong confidence. Their tone was one more excited than the other, completely forgetting the situation where they had to flee in a sorry state. The people at the foot of the mountain stared at the top, but Bai Changchun only looked at the sword in his hand. Hearing the sounds of kowtowing behind him, Bai Changchun was silent for a moment, then asked, "How did Yin Baikong die?" The two of them straightened their bodies, their faces filled with grief and indignation. Sikongju described the process of how his master died in battle in detail. When he talked about how Yin Baikong, a dignified soul formation final stage cultivator, self-destructed his dantian to perish together with the enemy, Bai Changchun frowned. He put down the sword in his hand, and his gaze locked onto the green-robed man at the foot of the mountain for the first time. At the foot of the mountain, Lu Mei and Bai Changchun's gazes met, then immediately laughed sharply. What arrogance! Let me see just how high this so-called world's #1 expert can be. His figure disappeared without a sound, then suddenly appeared on the opposite side of the mountain peak, hovering in the air, face to face with Bai Changchun less than 10 meters away. The atmosphere in cornucopia instantly froze. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the top, knowing that the inevitable moment had arrived. Some people had the foresight to know that the foot of the mountain might not be safe, so they quickly flew to the edge of the mountain to observe. Soon even Yu Qianqiu and the rest also moved away. The foot of the mountain was suddenly left in a mess, and not a single figure could be seen. Lu Mei sized up the green-robed elder, and his heart skipped a beat. He realized that he actually couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. But when he thought about how he also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation at the foot of the mountain, he immediately felt reassured. If it wasn't for that fatty secretly transmitting his voice to him, he would have been fooled. Just think about it, how could there be someone in the world who could surpass the cultivation of a netherworld knight? You're Bai Changchun? Lu Mei sneered sharply. Bai Changchun only glanced at him indifferently, then swung the sword in his hand backwards and said indifferently, You too, keeping Bai Kang's sword well. The two people who were kneeling hurriedly stood up. Sikongju went over to take the sword and retreated with both hands. Then he heard Bai Changchun say indifferently with his back facing them, It wasn't easy to establish the World Commerce Association. It's Yin Bai Kang's life's work. You two have to manage it well. Whether it's for the cultivators of the cultivation world or the mortals of the secular world, the World Commerce Association should have the goal of benefiting the world. Otherwise there's no need for it to exist. Do the two of you understand what I mean? Sikongju and Jing Yuankong looked at each other, then bowed in unison and said, Junior understands. Hearing this, Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan and Ouyang Da's expressions all changed. With Bai Changchun's words, even if Yin Bai Kang died, they could forget about attacking the World Commerce Association in the future. No one would dare to do anything to the World Commerce Association. Unless Bai Changchun died in the hands of the green-robed man. Chapter 659. Seeing that the other party dared to ignore him, Green Eyebrow was instantly enraged. He laughed sinisterly. What a narrow-minded old thing. Do you really think you're invincible? Today I'll let you know that there's always someone better than you out there. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong subconsciously took a few steps back. They all knew what was going to happen next. The aftershock of a battle between such experts would definitely be stronger than Yin Bai Kang's. Before everyone could react, the green-robed envoy had 2 green thorns in his hands. He turned into a ray of green light and suddenly appeared in front of Bai Changchun. Unexpectedly, Bai Changchun didn't move at all. He just stretched out his hand and inserted it into the ray of green light. It was as if the ray of green light had taken the initiative to enter his hand. The skinny green figure still stood at the edge of the cliff. He had one hand behind his back while the other was stretched out. He was in a stalemate with the ball of green light. The group of soul formation cultivators looked at each other. No one understood what was going on. Could it be that the two of them had started fighting silently? The ball of green light that was in a stalemate suddenly shook violently. It was more appropriate to describe it as struggling. Bai Changchun didn't even look at it. He looked into the distance and said leisurely, You've got guts. The human world isn't a place where you people from the netherworld can behave atrociously. The shaking green light flickered for a moment before it suddenly revealed itself. It didn't matter if it revealed itself, but it gave everyone a fright. The previously arrogant green-robed envoy was currently being held by the neck by Bai Changchun. He was like a duck being carried by Changchun as he stood at the edge of the cliff. It was so easy and effortless. The green-robed envoy struggled with great difficulty. Unfortunately, he couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. It was as if Bai Changchun was scaring a child. Grabbing a child by the neck and standing on the cliff to scare him. If he didn't listen to him, he would throw him down and kill him. How was that possible? The group of soul formation cultivators were all dumbfounded. It was so easy? Yu Qianqiu couldn't see clearly. He was scratching his head and ears anxiously. He pulled the dumbfounded Nongju's sleeves and asked, How is it? How is it? What's going on? However, Nongju did not come to her senses for a long time no matter how hard he pulled her. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong were standing closest to each other, so they had the clearest view. The two of them exchanged glances, and the shock on their faces was hard to conceal. Who would have thought that the Netherworld envoy who had forced Master to self-destruct his Dantian would be captured so easily by Changchun? Those who could see this scene clearly were not simple people. Naturally, they knew that this was not a simple coincidence. If not for the fact that his cultivation was far stronger than the other parties, reaching the level where he could lift something heavy as though it were light, there was no way he would be able to grab the other party's neck so easily. Everyone instinctively shrunk their necks. They could not imagine what it felt like to be grabbed by the neck by that hand. Even the green-robed Netherworld envoy, who had such a powerful cultivation, could not move at all. What would happen if it were to grab their necks? For those who were restless and had thoughts of plotting something behind Bai Changchun's back, Bai Changchun's heart was filled with hatred. This grab was even more uncomfortable than grabbing his own neck. Immediately, all his thoughts vanished into thin air. Strong. Too strong. Bai Changchun was indeed Bai Changchun. No wonder he was the #1 expert in the world. He was ridiculously strong. The soul formation experts had no choice but to admit defeat. When Lan Feng, who had been staring at the god of wealth peak, could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Only now did he realize how big the gap between him and Bai Changchun was. It was not just a small gap. He could survive from Lu Xing's hands twice. Even he did not believe that Lu Xing did not show mercy. With his neck tightly gripped, Lu Xing's pale face turned black. He bounced his limbs like a toad, looking very miserable. He wanted to stab the green thorns in his hands forward, but the moment he raised his hands, the pressure on his neck increased. He had no choice but to withdraw his hands obediently. The terrifying energy from that hand suppressed the netherworld energy in his body to the point that he did not even have the chance to release the green thorns. Bai Changchun's leisurely gaze fell on the half-dead Lu Mei, who was bouncing up and down. He said indifferently, "Didn't you want to let me know that there is always someone better than me in the world? I've been waiting for this day for almost 2,000 years. Don't let me down. Show me all you've got." Jia. Green eyebrows let out a strange sound from his throat, his eyes bulging outwards. He felt that Lu Sheng's hand suddenly increased when he said that. His neck was on the verge of breaking. If Lu Sheng exerted more pressure, his neck would probably be separated from his body. Bai Changchun stared at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "Show me all you've got. Don't think about running or you'll die miserably. Do you understand?" Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong were dumbfounded. The minds of all the soul formation stage lords went completely blank. Ka. Green Eyebrow couldn't utter a complete word in her throat. She tried her best to move her head slightly to show that she understood. After Bai Changchun understood what he meant, he raised his hand and threw Lu Mei down the mountain with a whoosh. Before anyone could react, they heard a loud boom and felt the ground beneath their feet tremble. Dust was rising at the foot of the mountain, and a huge hole was faintly discernible in the dust. When the smoke and dust dissipated, everyone saw a man covered in dust. He was hugging his neck as he tried to adjust himself. His green robe had already turned gray, and his hair was a mess. Black blood seeped out of his 7 orifices. He no longer looked like the arrogant netherworld envoy he had been before. The soul formation cultivators looked at each other and were speechless. As for those cultivators with average cultivation, even if they could not see clearly, they could tell from the situation that one was still standing on the mountain peak while the other had dug into the ground to eat dirt. They naturally knew that Bai Changchun had won the first exchange of blows. Bai Changchun, the undefeatable legend, did not let them down. They were extremely excited. After the green eyebrows in the pit slightly adjusted, it turned into a green light and flashed to the sky again. Looking down at Bai Changchun, it laughed fiercely. "Just now I was just careless and gave myself to you. Now I will let you know the price of being rude to me." The sharp voice reverberated in the air. It was very ear-piercing. He didn't even know what was going on just now. It was as if he had delivered himself into the hands of the other party, and he almost died of depression. However, he did not dare to be careless now. He had personally experienced that the other party's cultivation was indeed extraordinary. However, he was sure that it was a momentary mistake. Letting him go was the biggest mistake of his life. Bai Changchun looked up at the sky and said calmly, "I'll wait. I'll let you make the first move." Lu Xing stopped smiling. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of black blood on the 2 green thorns. Then, he held the 2 green thorns in his hands and spread them out devoutly. He muttered something as if he was offering a sacrifice. Suddenly, the 2 green thorns came together in his palms. He rubbed his palms together and the 2 green thorns gave off a dazzling green light. The light was so bright that no one dared to look at it directly. Suddenly, the green light disappeared and a hazy black cloud appeared in the sky. Lu Xing stood on the cloud and sneered at the peak of the mountain. Green light was faintly discernible in the rolling black cloud. Fierce roars came from inside as if there were some ferocious monsters inside. The people below were shocked. They had never seen such a scene in the cultivation world. Many people even complained that Bai Changchun should not have shown mercy. They were in big trouble now. Bai Changchun stared at the rolling black cloud in the sky and asked calmly, "This should be a spell from the netherworld, right?" "Yes." Lu Xing laughed strangely. Two gigantic snake heads that were as big as round tables poked out from the dark clouds behind him. Their red eyes were even bigger than two fists put together, revealing an extremely ferocious brilliance as they patrolled the surroundings. They opened their bloody mouths and flicked their forked tongues with a hissing sound. Their bodies, which were as thick as water buckets, continuously came out of the black clouds and coiled behind Lu Mei like two flying dragons. Just the pressure emitted by the two giant snakes was enough to make those with weaker cultivations tremble in fear. "These are the two green hell snakes that Lady Heiqi subdued. I didn't expect to use them in the human world today. Bai Changchun, you're really lucky." Green Eyebrows kept laughing in a strange manner. Bai Changchun nodded slightly and said, "I've heard that there are magical spells in the netherworld and the immortal world. I've seen the spell from the immortal world more than 200 years ago. It seems to be much stronger than yours. Is this your most powerful ability? If you have more, why don't you show it to me?" He was not afraid of trouble at all. He had seen the spells from the immortal world. The lords in the soul formation stage looked at each other, not knowing whether Bai Changchun was telling the truth or not. Even Nongzhu was confused. He had never heard Bai Changchun mention it, but he believed that Bai Changchun was not a liar. If he said he had seen it, then he must have. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu believed this because he had heard Bai Changchun mention that 200 years ago, he had met an immortal who had appeared out of nowhere. The two of them had even fought, and after fighting for half a day, that immortal had been killed by Bai Changchun. He guessed that Bai Changchun was talking about that time. "You really don't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. This treasure was given to me by Lady Heiqi. It is more than enough to deal with you." After Lu Mei finished speaking, she felt proud of herself. She threatened, "Bai Changchun, if you know what's good for you, hand over the knocker and the two beast teeth you stole from the underworld gate. Kowtow and apologize. If I'm satisfied with your attitude, maybe I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead." Then he raised his head and laughed crazily. His sharp laughter echoed between heaven and earth, mixed with the pleasure of revenge. Bai Changchun did not get angry. Instead, he asked calmly, "In that case, this is already your most powerful ability." Chapter 660. Hee. Lu Mei laughed sinisterly and said, "Bai Changchun, I'll give you one last chance. Hand over the thing and surrender to me. Otherwise, you'll learn from that old thing's fate." "I have it. Come and get it yourself if you can," Bai Changchun said lightly. "You really don't know what's good for you." Lu Mei let out a shrill laugh and sank into the dark clouds. In an instant, the two green snakes became restless. They let out earth-shattering roars and radiated a powerful aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. The gloomy and cold air of the netherworld quickly shrouded the sky and earth. The dark clouds in the sky surged in all directions, blotting out the sky and immediately turning the place into a dark netherworld. The two giant green snakes shuttled through the dark clouds like green lightning. The chilly wind swept across like bone-scraping knives. Those cultivators below the soul formation stage could no longer hold on and fled into the distance. The group of soul formation stage lords were also frightened by this earth-shattering aura. They had never seen such a grand scene before. They originally wanted to leave, but this kind of rare battle scene was irresistible to them. At their level of cultivation, it was difficult to see a battle beyond their imagination. Every time they saw one, they would gain some knowledge and it could be said to be of great benefit to their own cultivation. They were afraid of being affected, but they didn't want to give up such a good opportunity. Therefore, they released their protective aura in advance and watched attentively, not wanting to miss a single detail. Nongzhu's face was solemn. It was also the first time he saw Bai Changchun fight with such an expert. He tilted his head and nodded at Wenlanfeng. Wenlanfeng quickly brought Yu Qianqiu and the other two into his protective aura energy. On the dark mountain peak, Bai Changchun still stood motionless. He clenched one fist at the back of his waist and put the other down gently, as if he had the desire to make a move. The moment he put down one hand, Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong's pupils shrank. At the same time, they felt an indescribable aura emanating from the thin body. It was incomparably thick and spread between heaven and earth. The mountain peak that was covered by the dark and evil aura was instantly pushed away by a mighty aura. The dark and evil oppressive aura that was imposed on the two of them was instantly swept away. The two of them couldn't tell what was going on, but they suddenly felt their hearts filled with righteousness. The thin figure in front of them instantly became incomparably majestic in their hearts. It was as if he had already fused with heaven and earth, becoming a part of heaven and earth, coexisting eternally with heaven and earth. Everyone at the foot of the mountain stared at the mountain peak. In their eyes, the mountain peak that was originally so dark that they could not see clearly suddenly emitted a faint brilliance. Upon closer inspection, there was no light at all. However, the strange thing was that everything could be seen clearly on the God of Wealth Peak, which was further away. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Bai Changchun, I didn't expect you to have some skills. Green eyebrows' sinister laughter came from the depths of the dark clouds. Bai Changchun, on the other hand, had Chu Tian's eyes. He saw that in the sky above the forest, there were birds that could not escape in time. When they flew up and touched the dark clouds in the sky, they immediately fell down. The forest below was also withering and dying at a visible speed. His eyes flickered and his lips moved slightly. A sonorous voice like that of a Vajra subduing a demon echoed between heaven and earth. I originally wanted to spare your life for the time being and slowly interrogate you. But now it seems that I can't let a scourge like you live in this world. Arrogant. An angry shout came from the depths of the dark clouds. Two giant green snakes that were shining brightly stirred up huge waves in the ink-like dark clouds. Ah! They roared at the sky and intertwined with each other, forming a two-headed snake. They opened their bloody mouths at the same time, and with a rumbling sound, they pounced towards the mountain peak like green lightning. Bai Changchun's green robe suddenly fluttered. He stopped looking into the distance, looked up and waved one hand pointing at the sky. He put two fingers together, and a dazzling white light that was 6 meters long and 2 meters wide appeared. The moment the dazzling white light left his hand, there was a bang, like a thunderbolt on a clear day. The blast formed a powerful shock wave that spread out. Even the soul formation stage cultivators 1,000 meters away had to circulate their chi to resist it. Those with weaker cultivation were immediately pushed by the powerful shock wave along with their protective aura, and slid on the ground for more than 10 meters before they stopped. The group of people was terrified. They didn't expect that they could still be affected even though they were hiding 1,000 meters away. At this time, everyone had no time to think about anything else. While trembling in fear, they stared at the sky without blinking, for fear of missing a wonderful moment. They saw that the sharp light that seemed to be able to split the sky and earth illuminated the surroundings as if it was daytime. It whistled towards the two giant green snakes that were pouncing towards it. The two arrogant green snakes seemed to feel afraid in the face of such a fierce and earth-shaking attack. They panicked and wanted to dodge. However, they forgot that in order to increase the power of the attack, the two snakes had tangled into one, so it was a bit troublesome to dodge. They couldn't understand each other, so they opened their heads to one side. They wanted to dodge, but their bodies were connected to each other. They screamed in horror and wanted to scatter, but their long bodies were tangled together, making it difficult to separate. In the end, it was a bit too late. Bai Changchun didn't make a move, but once he made a move, it was a fatal blow. The shocking light shot towards the center of the entangled two giant snakes. It was stable, accurate, ruthless, and fast. It was precisely the center where the two giant snakes were entangled. The sharp light that was as bright as a comet broke through the two giant snakes effortlessly with a swoosh. It didn't stop there. It glided across the sky brilliantly, piercing through the dark clouds and causing them to undulate uneasily. Two shrill screams echoed in the sky. Because the two giant snakes were entangled together, they were split in the middle. Instantly they were cut into more than 10 pieces. Black blood with a fishy smell fell down like rain. What else do you have? Show me. Bai Changchun stood at the peak of the mountain and shouted. His voice resounded between heaven and earth. In the dark clouds, Lu Mei was already dumbfounded. The green thorn of the nether snake that Madame Blackpool had given him was his trump card. He had dealt with many people in the netherworld with it, but he didn't expect it to be so vulnerable in the hands of his opponent. That frightening light had already scared him out of his wits. Just this move alone wasn't something he could defend against. It was too powerful. He didn't have any more powerful skills to use. Escaping was the most important thing now. When Lu Mei came back to his senses, his first thought was to escape. You've brought disaster to the human world and you still want to run away. Bai Changchun, who was at the peak of the mountain, quickly sensed his opponent's movement. He shouted angrily and teleported to the sky. His thin body waved his arms in the air and shouted angrily, "Lost immortal finger." In an instant, the airflow between heaven and earth rapidly surged toward the thin figure in the sky. The majestic airflow instantly condensed in the fingers that were waving and circulating. Suddenly, countless dazzling lights shot into the sky. Although it was many times smaller than the shocking light from before, it was uncountable at this moment. Swoosh swoosh, the sound of the air exploding was endless. Countless dazzling white lights shot into the sky like a meteor shower, directly turning the dark clouds in the sky into sieves. The dark clouds were densely covered with white holes. Ah! A shrill scream came from the dark clouds. A mass of green light fell out of the dark clouds and turned into Lu Mei in the blink of an eye. He fell to the ground with a bang, clutching his chest and rolling on the ground, wailing incessantly. Black blood oozed from all over his body. He didn't look like a human anymore. No one knew how many holes there were in his body. Nongzhu looked at Lu Mei, who was rolling on the ground, and said blankly, "Damn it! It's lost immortal finger again." When Lan Feng recovered from the shock and turned his head to ask, "Have you seen Bai Changchun before?" Nongzhu looked back at him with a malicious smile and said, "You're lucky. You didn't see how miserable Li Duxing was 500 years ago. Except for losing an arm. Hey, how do you think he got those 80 holes in his body?" Li Duxing was also unlucky. He happened to meet Lao Bai, who had comprehended lost immortal finger. So he used him to try it. Don't you think you're lucky? When Lan Feng looked at his intact body and then at the wailing emissary of hell on the ground, he shuddered subconsciously. Everyone looked at Bai Changchun, who looked like a god of death in his cyan robe fluttering in the air. They opened their mouths wide and were dumbfounded. Bai Changchun was indeed Bai Changchun. He still acted in the same way. Once he made a move, someone would be doomed. Bai Changchun, who was floating in the air, glanced at Lu Mei, who was rolling on the ground, and snorted. Then he looked up at the dense dark clouds above his head. Nobody knew what he was thinking about. Suddenly he put his hands behind his back and stood straight in the air. He shouted solemnly, "There is righteousness in the world. Awe-inspiring righteousness. Subdue demons." His words were sonorous and reverberating between heaven and earth. In an instant, the air in the space where everyone was suddenly solidified. The surging dark clouds in the sky also gradually became still. Soon after, everyone was keenly aware that a mighty airflow was surging over from all directions. As it passed by them, everyone immediately felt that the dark and evil aura that was suppressing them had been taken away, and their hearts were suddenly relaxed. The mighty airflow surged endlessly and formed a tornado with Bai Changchun as the center. It rose into the sky and kept spinning in the air. The surrounding dark clouds gradually gathered towards the tornado. The sky that was covered by the dark clouds gradually shrunk, and the surroundings began to see light again. Then the tornado dragged an ink-like black curtain straight into the sky. The light shone brightly and the black dot in the sky gradually disappeared. Everyone's gaze shifted from the disappearing black dot to Bai Changchun with great difficulty. They were all dumbfounded. Nongzhu's handsome face became that of an idiot. They wondered how many things about Lao Bai that he did not know. Furong looked around, her face full of disbelief. Zi looked at Bai Changchun and kept giggling. Yu Qinchou's reaction was the most exaggerated. The saliva he had been holding back finally flowed out of his mouth. He continuously smacked his lips and swallowed. He looked at Bai Changchun with a pitiful expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 661. In the bright and beautiful sky, the figure suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Bai Changchun landed on the ground and stared at the rolling green eyebrows. As soon as the latter saw the person standing in front of him, even though he was in pain, he crawled up, knelt down, and kowtowed. He begged again and again, "It's me who failed to recognize you. Great immortal, please spare my life, please spare my life." There were at least dozens of holes on his hands, legs, and body. Black blood kept flowing out of his body, so he was lucky to be alive. However, looking at his skillful kowtowing, it really made everyone's eyes pop out. There was no trace of his previous arrogant and domineering appearance. Bai Changchun stared at him coldly and said indifferently, "Compared to the guy 200 years ago, you are far inferior. He still had the strength to fight with me, but you can't even withstand a single blow. At the same time, there is a problem that I have been thinking about for more than 200 years. Let's talk about you. Your cultivation is obviously not as good as mine, but we set off from the demon ghost region at the same time, and I can't catch up with you in terms of speed. I'm very puzzled. Can you explain it to me? Yes. Green Eyebrows nodded repeatedly, crawled on the ground and hurriedly replied, as long as great immortals spare my life, I will tell you the truth. Are you bargaining with me? Bai Changchun said indifferently. I dare not. Green Eyebrows hurriedly kowtowed. He could feel the killing intent in the other party's words. Bai Changchun snorted coldly, if you don't answer, die. If I'm not satisfied with your answer, die. I'll tell you. Green Eyebrows' face was covered with black blood, but it still couldn't hide the horror on his face. He said in a trembling voice, although I don't know why with great immortals' cultivation, you should have ascended to the immortal realm long ago. Otherwise, the flesh and blood of the human world can't bear such a strong cultivation like great immortal. The passage to the immortal realm has the effect of refining the body. It was only during the process of ascending that a new body was forged that it could withstand a stronger cultivation, and thus continue to climb to the peak of cultivation. This is just like the netherworld fire on the way to the underworld, which can also refine a new body for ghost cultivators in the human world. This is also why the cultivators of the mortal world are often inferior to the cultivators of the immortal world and the netherworld. Of course, you are an exception, great immortal. Bai Changchun nodded thoughtfully and said to himself, so that's how it is. I understand now. So it was my body that restricted the use of my cultivation. I had noticed this a long time ago. No wonder. Unfortunately, no one has been able to go to the immortal world yet, not even me. Lu Mei, who was prostrating at the side, raised her bloody face and asked weakly, Great Immortal, can you let me go now? Bai Changchun met his pitiful pleading gaze and asked expressionlessly, If I kill you, do you think the underworld will send a stronger person? Green Eyebrows screamed like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, Great Immortal, please don't kill me. If you kill me, Madame Blackpool will know immediately. She has many experts under her command and will definitely send experts from the underworld to trouble you. I'm just a nobody in the underworld. Great Immortal, you don't have to offend Madame Blackpool for me. When I go back, I will erase the matter of the gate of the underworld in front of Madame Blackpool. I guarantee that no one from the underworld will come to the mortal world to trouble you. Great Immortal, please think twice. Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Nongzhu shook her head and sighed, thinking, You are such an unlucky guy. Why did you have to say that Madame Blackpool has many experts under her command? If I kill you, she will send experts from the underworld to trouble me. It will be strange if Crazy Ol doesn't kill you. If you say that you will send experts to trouble Crazy Ol after you go back, Crazy Ol will let you go immediately. As expected, Bai Changchun's eyes lit up. He stared at Lu Mei and asked, When people from the underworld come to the mortal world, do they all come out from the place where you came from? Lu Mei was stunned. She didn't know what he meant. But to save her life, she answered honestly, Yes, that is the passage from the underworld to the mortal world. Bai Changchun nodded slightly and said, In that case, I only need to stay at the entrance of the cave to wait for the experts from the underworld to come out. Since I can't go to the underworld, this is a good idea. Lu Mei's small eyes suddenly opened wide. He would be an idiot if he still didn't understand what Ning Ke meant. Before he opened his mouth to beg for mercy, Bai Changchun waved his sleeve. Bang! Green Eyebrow screamed and flew into the air. When he fell, several sharp lights shot out from Bai Changchun's fingers. After a few swishes, Lu Mei was cut into several pieces and fell down. Before people could react, a shadow flew across the sky and disappeared in the direction of the demon ghost region. Bai Changchun left just like that? People looked at each other and felt that what happened just now was like a dream. However, the completely destroyed treasure bowl in front of them clearly told them that it was true. In the distance, the dozens of pieces of the giant snake in Lu Mei's body began to squeak and emit black smoke under the scorching sun. Under people's gazes, they soon became pools of black juice. This was the result of Bai Changchun's battle. However, when they thought of Bai Changchun's miraculous means just now, they all shuddered. He was too powerful. Especially the conversation between Bai Changchun and the Netherworld envoy, it exposed a very important piece of information. Bai Changchun's cultivation had long surpassed the soul formation stage. At the same time, people also learned the secret of why the people of the immortal world and the underworld were stronger than the cultivators of the human world. The entire treasure bowl had almost all traces of its creator erased. Only the remnants of the God of Wealth Peak were left. At the top of the God of Wealth Peak, Sikongju and Jing Yuankong were kowtowing in the direction that Bai Changchun disappeared in, thanking the benefactor who avenged their master. The two of them had to fulfill the instructions left behind by this benefactor. If they didn't, he said that there was no need for the world commerce to exist. No one doubted his words in the past and no one doubted his words now. After a long time, the two of them slowly stood up. The two of them faced the breeze and looked down the mountain. Not long ago their master In Baikong would often stand on the mountain peak and look down, looking at the foundation that he had single-handedly built. At the foot of the mountain, the various lords summoned their inner sect disciples to dig out their belongings from the ruins. Then they dispersed without any obstruction. Because the defensive formation that In Baikong had personally set up had been completely destroyed, it could no longer stop anyone. Seeing the people leaving, the two of them looked at each other with complicated gazes. No matter if it was because of the old grudges or the new grudges because of the 7-treasure pill, no one would find trouble with them anymore. Although the pillar of the world commerce was no longer here, the words that Bai Changchun had left behind were enough to intimidate everyone. As long as Bai Changchun was still here, no one in the cultivation world would dare to find trouble with the world commerce. Sikongju raised the God of Wealth sword in his hand. The two of them looked at each other silently. In the past, their master had always wanted to curry favor with Bai Changchun to ensure the safety of the world commerce. Who would have thought that not only would he not be able to fulfill this wish when he was alive, he would be able to fulfill it after his death. Some things that happen due to fate were often fated in the unseen world. It really couldn't be forced, junior brother. Huh? How about we work together to revive the world commerce? Of course. Other than completing Senior Bai's instructions, just like what Senior Bai said, the world commerce is Master's life's work. But I'm worried, the day of the East Holy Land's opening isn't far away. I'm afraid that we won't be able to fulfill our wish. Master once told me. Sikongju looked at Jing Yuankong and said solemnly, the past torture envoys of the demon ghost region were all outstanding figures. If one left, another would appear. The demon ghost region had been passed down from ancient times until now. Who knows how many secrets it had? No one dared to take it lightly. Not to mention anything else, just the countless demon kings and ghost kings in the demon ghost domain were the most powerful force in the world. They could easily wipe out any force in the cultivation world. Although the past torture envoys of the demon ghost region didn't easily interfere with the matters of the cultivation world, the demon ghost region was the true #1 power in the cultivation world. Since Senior Bai had spoken, even if he left, no one in the cultivation world would dare to touch the world commerce. Of course, the prerequisite is that we follow Senior Bai's words. That's good. We can do business in peace and cultivate in peace. We don't have to be afraid of being disturbed. I'm going to recall the people from the Limitless Island. The world commerce shouldn't interfere with the matters of the cultivation world anymore. Sikongju asked, what do you think? Jing Yuankong nodded and said, I agree. Sikongju didn't say anything else. He began to gather the disciples of the world commerce to clean up the things that belonged to the sect. Now that In Baikong was dead, Jing Yuankong didn't fight with him anymore. He naturally became the new leader of the world commerce. At the foot of the mountain, after the Blue Palace disciples finished cleaning up the ruins, Pei Fong waved his hand and let them go. He stood with Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangda. Looking at the devastation, the three of them looked at each other and sighed. Although the trouble this time was caused by the underworld envoy, the three of them couldn't help but associate it with Bai Changchun. Every time that old monster appeared, he would do something shocking. In fact, didn't the underworld envoy come to find him? They really hoped that he wouldn't appear again. Pei Fong glanced at Wen Lanfeng and the others who were still standing at the edge of the mountain and said to the two beside him, let's say goodbye to them before we leave. The three of them quickly went to Wen Lanfeng and the others. Pei Fong cupped his hands and said, everyone will take our leave now. We welcome you to visit the Blue Palace if you have the chance. He deliberately smiled at Farong and said, Miss Farong, if there's anything you need my help with in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. Just find a disciple of the Blue Palace to pass on the message. I'll do my best. Farong smiled and nodded. Then she heard Nongju sneer and say, Fatty Pei, there's something I don't understand and I need to ask you. You said that the strange green-robed man was fooled by Yu Qianqiu. Why did he suddenly turn against him when he was about to leave? Yes, I also find this strange. Pei Fong shook his head with a puzzled expression, appearing to be in disbelief. The others knew that Nongju wouldn't say such a thing for no reason. Even Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangda looked at Pei Fong suspiciously. Maybe the people of the underworld have some supernatural power that we don't know about. Pei Fang sighed and cupped his hands, saying, "Everyone farewell." After saying that, he flew into the sky. Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangda also cupped their hands and left. Nongzhu snorted and tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu. She believed that with Yu Qianqiu's cunning, he should be able to understand the meaning of her words. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would turn a deaf ear to him? His eyes were fixed on the ruins. Just when the group was baffled, Yu Qianqiu suddenly let out a loud cry and rushed into the ruins of the broken fences and dilapidated walls. Chapter 662. Stones and broken wooden beams were thrown all over the sky by someone. Yu Qianqiu was working hard in the ruins with a hard-working spirit that was incomparable to ordinary people. But no matter how they looked at him, he seemed to be possessed by a demon. When Lan Feng and the others looked at each other. All the sects were digging up their own treasures and disciples who were killed in the war. What was he digging up like a madman? This guy had a lot of treasures. Was he hiding them in that place? Nongzhu raised his eyebrows and touched his chin, pondering. A sinister smile appeared on his face. He looked around and vaguely recognized that the place Yu Qianqiu was digging seemed to be the original location of the Spring Slumber building. The sinister smile on his face froze. Looking at Ziyi, who was curious and eager to try, Nongzhu suddenly looked gloomy. He kind of understood what Yu Qianqiu was looking for. Except for him, perhaps only Lu Yanqing, who was wearing a gauze hat, understood. They could not help but flashed over. Yu Qianqiu buried his head in his work. Each time he dug up a corpse, he would immediately clean up the corpse's face. When he saw that it wasn't the person he was looking for, he didn't care about the consequences and directly threw it away. "You're crazy," Nongzhu shouted angrily. As soon as he flew over, he happened to catch a female corpse that Yu Qianqiu threw behind, and he also threw it behind. As a result, he almost hit a disciple of another sect. "How dare someone hit me with a corpse?" The disciple was also angry. He straightened up and was about to curse, but his mouth was covered by his fellow disciples. He pointed at Nongzhu and the others. The disciple immediately lost his temper and went to do what he was supposed to do. Yu Qianqiu picked up a wooden beam several meters long, turned around and threw it away. He stared at Nongzhu with a sullen face and said in a low voice, "Don't provoke me." He wiped his face with his dirty sleeve and continued to bury himself in the work. That scene made people feel an inexplicable sadness. They didn't know what he was trying to do to make himself look so miserable. Nongzhu's face was immediately drawn, and she was about to burst into rage. Ziyi, who wanted to join in the fun and dig for treasures, quickly stopped. Farong walked over and asked weakly, "What are you digging? Let me help you." Just as Yu Qianqiu raised his head and was about to reply, his eyes inadvertently fell on a group of people in front of him, and he was instantly stunned. The enchantress Yanyu, Tianyi, Mo Xiaojun, Haiwei, and Li Qiuxiang came together. The six of them saw that he was covered in dirt. He was half-straightened, one hand holding onto a broken window, the other holding onto an arm that was buried under the collapsed wall, and he was looking at them with his dusty face. "Yu Qianqiu, what are you looking for?" 100 Charm Beauty asked in confusion. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over Yanyu before he quickly shifted it away. There seemed to be some panic in his eyes. He let go of the arm that was holding the dead body, and threw the broken window as far as he could. He stood up and patted off the dust on his palms. He assumed a confident posture and waved his hand to point at the busy crowd around him. "I'm a kind-hearted person. Everyone else is working, but I'm just standing at the side. I feel bad about it, so I've come to lend a hand." "Really?" 100 Charm Beauty looked doubtful, as if she did not believe what he said. She looked around but did not find any clues. "Of course." Yu Qianqiu nodded with an honest face. However, Farong, who was beside him, believed what he said very much. She pulled his sleeve and said seriously, "I will also help you." Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and he said awkwardly, "Forget it. It's fine as long as we have the intention. We can help people for a while, but we can't help them forever. Let's call it a day. We'll talk about it later." After that, he wiped the dust off his buttocks with both hands. It seemed that he was going to quit. Farong nodded and said, "Oh." Suddenly, an uncontrollable laughter came from the side. The few of them turned their heads to look and discovered that it was Lu Yanqing. When Lan Feng asked curiously, "Yanqing, what are you laughing at? Did you think of something funny?" Lu Yanqing quickly shook her head and said, "Nothing. Stubborn duck." Nongzhu sneered with a face full of disdain. He finally knew that when it came to this kid he could say anything that was horizontal, straight, and dead. In short, he was the one who was in the right. Yenyu, what are you laughing at? 100 Charm Beauty suddenly found that Yenyu was also biting her lips and laughing. Yenyu immediately waved her hand and said, "Nothing." But anyone could see that she was smiling from the bottom of her heart. Her face was bright and she stood in the ruins, looking unusually dazzling. Everyone present was stunned. Yu Qianqiu naturally knew what she was laughing at, but he was thick-skinned and didn't care, as if he didn't know anything. "What can you do to me?" When Lanfeng looked at both sides and couldn't see why the two women were laughing, so he asked Nongzhu, "Nongzhu, what's your plan?" Nongzhu looked up at the ruins of the God of Wealth Peak and said, "Everyone in the cornucopia parted on bad terms. I naturally want to go to Shuntian Island and ask Old Bai how many secrets he has that I don't know. It turns out that the guy's cultivation has surpassed the soul formation stage. He actually hid it from me for so many years. I've long felt that his cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. He's too strong." When Lanfeng smiled bitterly and shook her head. She then asked Yu Qianqiu, "What about you?" Yu Qianqiu frowned and said slowly, "The appearance of the Netherworld envoys and the opening of the East Holy Land are not far away. I always feel that the world is going to change. I hope I'm just overthinking, but I want to settle some things. It's never wrong to be prepared." Some people didn't understand what he meant, but those who knew the inside story understood what he was saying. Once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, his days would be a bit difficult. Although this guy became famous quickly, he had offended too many people. Nongzhu originally had a stomach full of complaints about his promiscuous relationships, but seeing him like this, her eyes became a little sympathetic. Once the East Holy Land was opened, would Bai Changchun really pass the position of the torture master of the demon region to him? If he really did, would he be able to subdue the thousands of demons and ghosts in the demon region? One should know that after Bai Changchun took over the demon region, he also ruthlessly washed the place with blood several times before he completely subdued those demons and ghosts. Could he inherit the glory of the demon region's torture masters? Could he defend against external strong enemies? When she thought that the position of the torture master might fall into this guy's hands, Nongzhu couldn't imagine the reaction of the various forces in the cultivation world when the news was announced. This guy would have a heavy burden on his shoulders in the future. When Lanfeng was silent, he raised his hand and pointed at the temptress and Yenyu. "Are the two of them still going with us?" The two girls looked at each other, not knowing what he meant. Yu Qianqiu said to the temptress of 100 Charms, "Yin Baikang is dead. I'm afraid the forces here will be thrown into chaos. The two of you should go to Senior Lu's place in Spirit Fragrant Valley for the time being. I'll think of something in the future." He didn't care whether the two agreed or not. He waved his hand domineeringly and said, "It's settled then." The temptress immediately threw a reproachful look, but no matter how you looked at it, it looked like a flirtatious wink. Yenyu didn't say anything. She just kept staring at Yu Qianqiu. However, Yu Qianqiu kept avoiding her eyes, but he still arranged an escape route for her in a domineering manner. "I'll have to trouble the two seniors." Yu Qianqiu bowed to Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing and said, "When I find Niu Yud, I'll definitely get the elixir I promised you two seniors." The bright eyes under the green gauze rolled a white eye. Lu Yanqing was speechless, feeling that he thought he did not know that he was Niu Yud. When Lanfeng's expression was sluggish. He waved his hand and said, "The elixir is not urgent. If you can't find Niu Yud, then forget it. It doesn't matter if you don't have him." He had already eaten something that killed people. After a discussion, they went their separate ways. Nongzhu also took Ziyi and Furong away, leaving Yu Qianqiu standing alone in the ruins and looking around. Later, he flew alone to the primeval forest outside the treasure basin. In the back hall of the Dark Nether Palace, Lady Blackpool was still lying naked in the hot spring, being served by 5 handsome and strong pampered men. In the hazy water mist, Lady Blackpool was so comfortable that she closed her eyes and kept moaning under the massage of 10 big hands. At this moment, hurried footsteps came from outside the black veil. They came to the side of the bath made of black jade and stopped. It seemed that they didn't dare to disturb her. "Why are you in such a hurry? Is the Minghuang mountain going to collapse?" Lady Blackpool snorted and said, "If you have something to say, just say it." Maid Feifeng immediately replied, "Lumei's memorial tablet is broken. I've asked the guards of the underworld, but Lumei hasn't come back." After that, she didn't say another word. Her slightly closed phoenix eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes flashed for a while, and a majestic momentum directly shook away the 5 pampered men around her. Lady Blackpool disappeared in the hot spring. The black dress on the clothes rack beside the hot spring dashed up and hovered above the hot spring, wrapping her naked body in the dress. Lady Blackpool, who was floating above the hot spring, glanced at Fei-Fing and suddenly turned into a beam of black light and flew away. She dashed out of the dark nether palace like a shooting star, heading directly to the towering dark royal palace. The serene wood forest had branches but no leaves. As soon as the black light entered the dark serene wood forest, a silver light flashed in front of the small building surrounded by the serene wood forest. The commander of the royal guards of the dark royal palace appeared at the same time. The commander of the royal guards of the dark royal palace stared at Lady Blackpool indifferently and disdainfully, saying indifferently, "Blackpool, if you dare to take one more step forward, I don't mind kicking you out of the dark royal palace." Lady Blackpool bit her lips and stopped on her knees, saying, "Greetings, Lord Silver Armor. Please tell the Emperor of the Underworld that Blackpool has something important to report." After she learned that the Silver Armor commander of the Dark Royal Guards was one of the legendary 12 underworld generals of the Underworld, she didn't dare to act presumptuously in front of the Silver Armor commander of the Dark World, no matter how unhappy she was. She knew that the Silver Armor commander of the Dark Royal Guards had the ability to deal with her. Chapter 663. The indifferent eyes of the soldier in silver armor were startled a bit. It was obvious that he didn't expect Madame Blackpool to kneel down to him. Perhaps the sincerity of Madame Blackpool had moved the underworld emperor. A dignified and calm voice drifted out from the small building, "Say it outside." A few large fireflies flew up from the tree trunks of the deep wood forest and clung to the window of the small building. Madame Blackpool raised her head and saw a man with a noble and elegant temperament appear at the window under the flickering light. His penetrating gaze passed through the deep wood forest and gazed at the night sky in the distance. Then he slowly looked down. His gentle gaze revealed an unconcealable majesty and indifference, giving people a startling feeling. It was a majesty that seeped out from his bones. "Greetings, Underworld Emperor." Madame Blackpool bowed and said, "Get up and talk." Though the Underworld Emperor said it politely, he didn't mean to let her in. "Thank you, Underworld Emperor." As soon as Madame Blackpool stood up, the Underworld Emperor asked her in a condescending manner, "What's the matter?" Madame Blackpool reported angrily, "Underworld Emperor, something terrible has happened. The Underworld envoy I sent to the human world to investigate the stolen item from the gate of the Underworld was killed in the human world." Before Madame Blackpool could finish, the Underworld Emperor interrupted her, "You came to disturb me for this matter?" Madame Blackpool was taken aback, and the anger on her face cooled down. She said angrily, "The mortals in the human world are outrageous. They dared to kill the Underworld envoy. Blackpool asks the Underworld Emperor to send someone to punish the murderer." The fireflies that were climbing on the window suddenly flew away quickly, as if they were frightened by something. It became dark outside the window. Though there was light in the room, no one could see the expression of the person outside the window. All they could see was a figure with a pair of cold eyes flickering. He said in a deep voice, "Blackpool, do you remember what I said when I agreed to send someone to the underworld?" Madame Blackpool was startled. She sensed the anger in the Underworld Emperor's words. She knelt down again and said, "Blackpool doesn't dare to forget it. The Underworld Emperor said that this is the only time. No matter what the result is, it is not allowed to happen again." "What else?" asked the Underworld Emperor. "If it happens again, you don't have to serve me anymore. You should go to the endless dark sea to serve those laborers." It's good that you remember." The Underworld Emperor said emotionlessly, "If you are tired of staying in the dark nether palace and want to go to the endless dark bottom to enjoy yourself, I will grant you your wish. Emperor of the Underworld, please calm down. I won't dare to do it again." Madame Blackpool bowed on the ground in fear. "It's good that you understand. If there's nothing else, you can leave," the Underworld Emperor said. "Underworld Emperor, there is one more thing." Heichi straightened his back and said, "The Celestial Realm sent someone to contact me. They said something strange happened in one of the 72 worlds. Countless years have passed and no one from that world ascended to the Celestial Realm. Thus he sent down 16 guides to investigate, but none of them returned. Recently, someone from that realm sounded the immortal ascension bugle, but there's still no news of the people they sent out, and they haven't returned. What do you want to say to me?" the Underworld Emperor asked icily. Madame Heichi said respectfully, They suspect that there might be something wrong with the passage to that world, and they want me to ask the Underworld Emperor to lend me the passage to the Underworld. Heichi, you are from the Underworld. When did you become the messenger of the Celestial Realm? The Underworld Emperor turned around and walked away from the window. His indifferent voice drifted out from the room. Them? Which them? Do they have the right to negotiate with me? Go back and tell them that they don't have the right to talk to me. Tell Jintai to come and talk to me in person. 1,000 soldiers, no one is allowed to trespass this place without my permission. Yes. The silver armor 1,000 soldiers cupped his hands and accepted the order. Then he waved at Madame Heichi to send her away. Heichi was frightened by the Underworld Emperor's words. When did you become the messenger of the Celestial Realm? She knew the Underworld Emperor didn't like the people of the Celestial Realm. Though she didn't know the reason, she knew she had misspoken this time. The Underworld Emperor deprived her of the right to trespass this place. She wanted to explain, but she didn't dare to say anything else. She knelt and kowtowed, saying, Heichi will remember. Heichi will leave now. Then she turned into a black light and left. After she left, the silver armor 1,000 soldiers appeared on the small building. The Underworld Emperor, who was holding the ancient scroll, said without turning his head, what kind of person did she send to the human world this time? How could he be killed by a cultivator in the human world? The silver armor 1,000 soldiers relaxed when no one was around. He walked to the Underworld Emperor's side and took out an ancient scroll from the bookshelf. He opened it and said, a pampered man called Lu Mei. He was just a clown trying to please the crowd. His cultivation level was not worth mentioning. He was only a mid-stage netherworld warrior. The Underworld Emperor tilted his head and said, the mid-stage netherworld warrior is not worth mentioning, but don't forget that it was the human world. How high do you think the mortal body of a cultivator in the human world can withstand? This person is not simple to kill a mid-stage netherworld warrior. The silver armor 1,000 soldiers was startled. He put the ancient scroll back on the bookshelf and said with a frown, now that you mention it, it is a bit strange. I didn't expect such a person to appear in the human world. Should I go there myself and see who did it? It's not the right time. Let's talk about it later. The Underworld Emperor shook his head slightly. In the middle of Wuxia, in a deep mountain not far from a bustling city, there was a mountain god temple that was full of incense. In front of the temple, there was an endless stream of people who came from the city to burn incense and pray devoutly. Behind the temple, there was a quiet wing built halfway up the mountain. Standing on the platform in front of the wing, one could see the crowd of people coming and going to worship at the foot of the mountain. Under the shade of the trees, Yu Qianqiu quietly looked at the mountain god temple with green smoke curling up. He said with a smile, you two are really good at picking a place. I didn't expect you two would hide here and enjoy the human world. Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi stood on either side of him. Hong Qi had grown into a mature young man after not seeing him for a few years. Hong Qi said with a smile, this is a rundown temple. If we didn't take over it, it wouldn't be so full of incense. I heard that the Hong Gang and Qing Gang suddenly appeared in the Wuxia cultivation world. I know it's the two of you. Yu Qianqiu looked around and joked, you two are really famous. Hong Qi said with an embarrassed smile, how can we be as famous as you, master? We're just making a small ruckus in the Wuxia cultivation world. We only managed to make a ruckus by taking advantage of the trouble on Wuji Island. Otherwise we would have been wiped out by the righteous and demonic sections. But master, you're famous all over the world. I heard that you're the #1 expert below the soul formation stage. I'm honored. I haven't seen you for a few years and you've learned how to be glib. Looks like you've gotten a lot of benefits. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and stared at Gu Qingyun. How is it? It's freer than you on that Fushin Island, right? Gu Qingyun smiled and joked, at least I don't have to bow and bow all day like I did on Fushin Island. I'm now the leader of the world-famous Qing Gang. I'll rob anyone who dares to mess with me. He had been living in the outside world for so many years and had accepted many things. It was just like what Yu Qianqiu said. If he was still on Fushin Island, he might not be able to break through to the core formation stage. Hong Qi laughed and said, that's right. Fushin Island is nothing. Sect leader Feng Xiangtian has sent invitations to us in the cultivation world several times, but we've been too lazy to care. So what if we're the #1 sect in the world? Gu Qingyun rolled his eyes and said mockingly, don't be so arrogant here. Do you think Feng Xiangtian is so easy to mess with? If it wasn't for Wuji Island, he would have come to destroy us a long time ago. You haven't stayed on Fushin Island, so you don't know. Fuxian Island is very powerful. To be able to dominate the cultivation world for so many years, there must be many hidden experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Hong Qi said disapprovingly, "What are you afraid of? With Master's current reputation, we can just use Master's name at the crucial moment. I don't think Fuxian Island will dare to act rashly against us." The two of them glanced at each other, then looked at Yu Qianzhou and chuckled. They indeed had a sense of superiority. All the sects in the cultivation world were worried that they would be attacked by the spirit-severing experts of the various countries and lived in fear. On the other hand, they had the foundation laid by Yu Qianzhou in the various countries. They didn't have to worry about anything. When they had nothing to do, they could rob others and live like kings. Gu Qingyun asked curiously, "Boss, why did you suddenly come to find us?" "Yes." Yu Qianzhou nodded and said, "I heard that almost all the independent cultivators in the cultivation world listen to your orders. I also heard that you guys are quite a deterrent to the small sects of the righteous and demonic Tao. So, I came to find you two to ask for your help." Hong Qi asked curiously, "With Master's ability, do you still need our help?" Yu Qianzhou glared at him and looked into the distance. Soon, the millions of soldiers that have been occupying the western region of the cultivation world for a long time will march out and conquer the entire cultivation world. You two keep a close eye on those sections. If anyone dares to interfere, teach them a lesson. Don't be polite, I'll take care of it." The two looked at each other. They knew that Shi Wenguang was Yu Qianzhou's man, but they didn't expect them to collude and make preparations to conquer the world. Gu Qingyun frowned and said, "We can barely deal with those small sects, but those large sects. Boss, to be honest, we can't stop them. I'll give each of you 1,000 men from the Utopia army." Yu Qianzhou turned around and stared at the two of them. "You don't have to worry about those large sections. I'll deal with them. Is there any problem?" Their eyes lit up. They naturally knew the power of the Utopia army. Hong Qi asked weakly, "Master, are they all early-stage tribulation transcendence experts?" Yu Qianzhou nodded. Hong Qi immediately rubbed his hands excitedly and said, no problem at all. Master, when will you give us that person?" "I'll give him to you now. Prepare early," Yu Qianzhou said. The two of them excitedly led him deep into the mountains. Chapter 664. At the western border of Wuxia, there was a culture and customs of a foreign land, with merchants from all over the world coming and going. In the hundreds of miles of barracks at the border, the army trained day in and day out. For many years, the army had been in a state of constant preparation for war. Yu Qianzhou quietly appeared at the back of the main tent. When the cultivators he sent saw him, they were surprised at first, then happy, but when they wanted to salute him, he waved his hand to stop them. Gently pulling the curtain aside, he saw Shi Wenguang and his son sitting around the table, gesturing with their hands to draw a map. Just as Yu Qianzhou was about to step out, he suddenly heard Shi Tian muttering, "Father, are we really going to keep waiting like this? The army has been training like this for a long time, everyone will get tired, it's not good for the morale of the army." "Shut up, Mr. Yu will naturally have arrangements." Shi Wenguang signaled to the back of the tent with his eyes, hinting him not to speak carelessly. There were still people sent by Yu Qianzhou. Then he said in a low voice, "Don't think I don't know, you've been secretly sending a group of people back to the capital, what are you planning?" "I knew I couldn't hide it from father." Shi Tian smiled bitterly, "I've sent people back to spy on the situation to see if there's a chance to bring everyone back. Our family has been separated for too long, it's not a good idea to continue like this." Shi Wenguang also sighed and shook his head. "It's easier said than done, the imperial court has probably sent people day and night to keep an eye on them. Even if they can escape from the capital, it's a long journey, and there's also a heavy military presence, how can they make it? I'm afraid we can only ask for Mr. Yu's help." Yu Qianzhou smiled, opened the curtain, and walked out. The day of the Grand General's family reunion is not far away. The father and son looked over, and when they saw him, they were overjoyed and cupped their hands together. "Greetings, Mr." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand at them, indicating that there was no need to be so polite, then looked at them carefully. Perhaps it was because of the hardships at the border, Shi Tian already had the image of a middle-aged man. On the other hand, Shi Wenguang was still healthy and strong even after a few years. There were still no signs of aging on his face, most likely due to the pills. Yu Qianzhou's eyes finally landed on Shi Tian, smiling. Looks like the young general can't wait any longer and is eager to reunite with his family. Shi Wenguang was slightly startled, knowing that Yu Qianzhou had heard his son's grumbling. He hastily cupped his hands in apology and said, "It's all my son's fault. He's insensible and full of nonsense. Please forgive him. Great General, you think too much. Who doesn't want their family to be reunited? This is human nature. What crime is there? After saying that, Yu Qianqiu walked to the entrance of the tent with his hands clasped behind his back and looked at the soldiers training outside. Amidst the deafening battle cries, he nodded in satisfaction. The father and son followed behind. Shi Wenguang asked, "Just now Mr. said that the day of my family reunion is not far away. What does Mr. mean?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and strode to the commander's seat in the center. He stared at the two and asked, "If I let you make sufficient preparations before the battle, how long would it take for you to finish?" The father and son looked at each other, understanding the meaning behind Mr. Grand General's words. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Shirin Tian could not wait to answer, half a month is enough." Yu Qianqiu frowned, staring at Shi Wenguang. "Grand General, you are an expert in war, but you can't afford to rush. I'll give you a month to prepare, is that enough?" Shirin Tian immediately knew that he was being too impulsive. Shi Wenguang also glared at him, then replied, "Actually, we have always been preparing. It's just a small battle. The army can be mobilized at any time. If it's a big battle, it will take some time, but a month's time difference is not bad." "Good. Then I'll give you a month's time. A month later, I will bring your family back safely on time." Yu Qianqiu looked out of the tent and waved his hand. "Time doesn't wait for me. 1 month later, the army will march east. I will not directly intervene in the war between mortals, nor will I let other cultivators interfere. I've given you a chance. When the time comes, let's see if your Shi family has the ability to change the dynasty of Huaxiao and earn your Shi family's eternal inheritance." After waiting for so many years, the day had finally arrived. The father and son were so excited that they could not speak, and they bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu stood at the top of a lush tree in the depths of a mountain forest. In front of him was a large manor that was connected together. Behind the manor was a huge waterfall. The rushing water split into two along the river, circling around the manor on both sides before merging into a single river and going far away. This huge manor was like a paradise. It was none other than the Wu clan, one of the 4 major clans that Yu Qianqiu had not set foot in for many years. Above his head, there were cultivators flying past, some alone, some in pairs, and some in groups of 3 to 5, rising and landing on the Wu clan's Hat Island. No one would pay attention to a cultivator who looked relatively young. Even if they occasionally saw him, they would just quickly pass by, not bothering to pay attention. When separating from Gu Qingyun, Yu Qianqiu mentioned that he was going to the Wu clan, and Gu Qingyun immediately informed him that the Wu clan's grand auction that was held once every 5 years was about to be held. Looking at the bustling scene deep in the old forest in front of him, Yu Qianqiu sighed endlessly. Time passed so quickly, he did not expect that 3 auctions had passed in the blink of an eye. These years had been spent in a busy manner, and it suddenly felt like only 2 or 3 years had passed, but looking back, it had been 15 years since he first came here. He still remembered when he was in Swallow City. He joined on Kwangsung because of a jade pendant. The past was still vivid in his mind, and counting with his fingers, it had been more than 20 years since he stepped into the cultivation world. In this way he seemed to be in his early 40s, but in the cultivation world 40 years old was still young. "I wonder how that girl from the Wu clan is doing," Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself, standing on the treetop as the wind rose and fell, and shook his head with a bitter smile. In fact, because he had the golden bead, he could come here to see that girl every day, but he did not do so, and devoted all his energy to the great cause of scheming against others. Could it be that she was already married? After thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely. This era was different from his previous life, and Wu Lixue had already been branded with his Yu Qianqiu's mark. She could not be married at will. But because of this, he wanted to use the opportunity of the Wu clan's auction to make a high-profile appearance and announce that he had returned. Now, he was a little afraid of seeing that girl's sad eyes when he went to the Wu clan. "We have to meet anyway. At worst, I'll just get beaten up by that girl and it's okay if I die." Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth, jumped off the treetop and flew quickly to Hat Island. Being on the streets of Hat Island, Yu Qianqiu looked around and there was not much change. Looking left and right, he walked in the bustling crowd and no one paid attention to him. After all, not everyone had seen him with their own eyes. But it was not that no one had not seen him, so, Suddenly, someone on the street let out a long cry of surprise. "Damn it. I thought no one would recognize me after making a high-profile appearance." Yu Qianqiu criticized in his heart, and continued to walk his own path and let others be surprised. The passers-by followed the surprised person's gaze and immediately someone couldn't help but exclaim again, "It's Yu Qianshou." "What? It's Yu Qianshou? Where? Where?" "It's really him, Yu Qianshou is back." The entire streets of Hat Island were suddenly in an uproar, and the news quickly spread that Yu Qianshou, who had become the #1 expert below the soul formation stage in a foreign country, had returned. The first reaction of the disciples of the various sects was to run back to the shops of their sects and pass this important news back to their own sections. Under the gaze of countless people, Yu Qianshou felt like returning home in glory. When he walked to the river bridge that had been destroyed in the battle with Luo Qingtian and had been rebuilt, a large group of people from the Wu clan had already flown over. The person who was laughing was naturally the Wu clan's clan master, Wu Sihai. He had met most of the others before. Yu Qianshou cupped his hands at them and said with a smile, "Long time no see, how are you all?" The current Yu Qianshou was no longer comparable to the Yu Qianshou of the past. His reputation was not just ordinary. It was said that he had been personally acknowledged by a soul formation final stage expert as the #1 expert below the soul formation stage. In addition, some of the higher-ups of the Wu clan knew that he was Bai Changchun's disciple, so they were all polite to him and greeted him back. Good, good, good. Wu Sihai looked at him and couldn't help but clap his hands and praise him a few times. He was so happy that he couldn't speak. Then he waved his hand and said, "Please." Yu Qianshou glanced at the crowd, but he didn't see Wu Lishue's figure. After feeling slightly disappointed, he didn't stand on ceremony and flew into the sky, following the Wu clan's group to the Wu clan's residence. After arriving at the Wu clan's ancestral hall, Yu Qianshou respectfully bowed to the remade portrait of Bai Changchun in the center. The original portrait had already been burned by him. Then the Wu clan's people all followed suit and bowed. Ever since Bai Changchun, the #1 figure in the cultivation world, was widely known by the people of China's cultivation world, the entire Wu clan became more and more respectful to this portrait. They even sent people to guard it so that the tragedy of being burned down last time wouldn't happen again. If that happened, they would be letting down the old ancestor. After a series of courteous greetings, Yu Qianshou was a little impatient. He really didn't have a common language with this group of people. Just think about it, when he first met this group of tribulation-passing experts, he still felt a little excited. Now that they were asking and answering, he felt that it was boring. He could only force a smile and deal with them. It wasn't that he looked down on them, but he had seen too many big scenes. Right now, his eyesight and knowledge had far surpassed them. It felt like an adult talking to a 3-year-old child. However, he couldn't show his unwillingness because of Bai Changchun and Wu Lishue. Otherwise, with his temper, he would have left long ago. Wu Sihai understood this fellow who liked to cause trouble wherever he went. He dismissed everyone and asked someone to lead Yu Qianshou to the quiet guest house to rest. Chapter 665. As soon as he arrived at Quiet Guest House, Yu Qianshou dismissed the Wu family's disciples who asked him if he needed anything. He strolled around the garden alone and even peeked through the cracks in the rockery, but he did not find a place to hide someone. He could not help but look around and ponder. Didn't Wu Sihai hint that Wu Lishue would often be alone here? Where did she go? Could it be that she's deliberately avoiding me? It seems like that girl is angry that I haven't been here for a long time. Yu Qianshou chuckled and ran back to his room, instantly disappearing. When he reappeared, he had already returned to a remote place in Utopia. He closed his eyes and contacted the item he had given Wu Lishue. From Wu Sihai's words, that girl was still thinking about him. In that case, the item he gave her should be with her. Not long after, he found the location of the item and appeared in the room again. After that, he went straight downstairs to the back room, only to find that his target location was actually a small storeroom in the corner. He frowned immediately and without saying a word, he directly kicked the door in with a ping-ping sound. Immediately, an ear-piercing scream rang out from inside. With a murderous look on his face, Yu Qianshou dashed in with a ball of black flames in each of his hands. When he saw the person squatting in the gray corner, he quickly scanned the surroundings warily, but he did not discover anything. He retracted the black flames in his hands, and the murderous look on his face disappeared. He stared at the person in the corner and said in shock, "Wu Lishue, what are you doing here?" He thought that Wu Lishue had been kidnapped or trapped in this small space, so he broke the door and barged in. Unexpectedly, it was not as he thought. He saw Wu Lishue hugging a ball of light that flickered and dimmed in the corner of the storeroom full of junk. Wu Lishue was looking at him with her eyes blinking. She was completely fine. Seeing that she did not say anything, Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "What did you scream about?" He did not know that he had suddenly kicked the door open and startled her. Wu Lixue shook his head and slowly moved over. He weakly bowed and said, "Mr. Yu." Then he quickly walked out. Yu Qianqiu was stunned by the way she addressed him as Mr. Yu. Then he suddenly realized that this girl was really angry. So, he quickly dashed out and stood in front of Wu Lixue. He originally wanted to reprimand her, but he discovered that this girl looked haggard and didn't have the lively and adorable liveliness she used to have. He immediately became discouraged and lowered his head to admit his mistake. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have not come to see you for so long. Are you angry? I promise I won't do it again. Li Shui, please give me another chance. I'm afraid that you'll ignore me." He firmly believed that an innocent girl was easy to educate. She stared at him with her big, unblinking eyes and immediately became extremely wronged. Her eyes became misty and big drops of tears flowed down. Her shoulders trembled and she choked with sobs. With this cry, Yu Qianqiu felt even more guilty. He immediately pulled her into his arms and let her tears drench his chest. He carefully patted her back and comforted her. "Don't cry, don't cry." In the end, the more he comforted her, the sadder she seemed to cry. She hid in his arms and sobbed, "I thought you didn't want me anymore." "Nonsense, how is that possible?" Yu Qianqiu coaxed her like he was coaxing a child. "The sisters in the family all say that you're now a great person in the cultivation world. You don't like a woman like me and won't want me anymore." Wu Lixue kept sobbing and complaining. It seemed like she had heard a lot of gossip. "Damn it! Who's the one who's talking nonsense?" Yu Qianqiu pushed her shoulders away with a murderous look and said fiercely, "Who's the one who said that? Bring me to her and I'll kill them all. Let's go now." He turned around and walked away as if he was really going to kill someone. With this scare, Wu Lixue immediately stopped crying. She grabbed him with one hand and panicked, "Don't. They're just saying it casually. Don't kill them." She grabbed him with one hand and held on to something in her other hand that was red and bright. She refused to let go. "They're just saying it casually. Why are you crying like this? I don't believe it. Let's go and settle the score with them." Yu Qianqiu looked like he wouldn't stop until he killed a few people. He actually pushed the reason why she was crying to someone else and he did it so confidently. How could Wu Lixue withstand his bluff? She was really scared out of her wits. She grabbed onto him with all her might and shook her head with all her might. "I won't cry anymore. It really isn't their fault." She knew Yu Qianqiu's style of doing things. Back then he didn't even blink when he killed the Wu clan's elder. Why would he care about the lives of a few unrelated little girls? Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked, "You really won't cry anymore? You were the one who said that the sisters in the clan were gossiping. You're still crying. It must be true. I'll kill them now." He acted like he was going to kill someone again. "I won't cry anymore. I really won't cry anymore." Wu Lixue's face was covered in tears, but she tried her best to squeeze out a smile to tell him that she really wouldn't cry anymore. In the end, her smile was even uglier than her crying. Yu Qianqiu's heart softened. He couldn't bear to bluff her anymore. He bent over and carried her in his arms. He ran up the stairs and into the room. As soon as she was carried into the room, she thought of what he was going to do. She immediately said shyly, "What are you going to do?" Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly and said, "What else do you think I'm going to do? I haven't seen you for a long time. Naturally, I want to make up for what I owe you." Wu Lixue's exclamation immediately sounded in the room. Then Yu Qianqiu complained, "Let go. Why do you keep holding this broken egg? Just throw it away." "I can't throw it away. This is the first thing you gave me. Damn it. It's inconvenient for you to keep holding this. Don't snatch it. Grandaunt, can you let go first? It won't be too late to hug it after we're done." Then there was a dong-dong sound in the room. It was the sound of something being thrown to the ground and rolling around. What is this?" Wu Lixue's surprised voice came from the room. It's fun, right? This is the water art that I cultivate. I'll help you wash your flowery face first. Then we'll take a bath together." The sound of water splashing could be heard. Then the room was filled with Wu Lixue's cheerful laughter and Yu Qianqiu's sinister laughter. It seemed that the two of them were having a great time playing in the water. After a while, the window upstairs was opened. A small pool of water smashed into the garden with a bang and thoroughly watered the flowers and grass. Then the window was closed tightly. There was a chaotic and unbearable sound coming from inside. It was really like a spring sleep without waking up. Until noon the next day, the sound of someone waking up lazily came from the room after a night of soul-stirring battle. No one knew what Wu Lixue was muttering. After a while, the sound of water splashing could be heard in the room again. It seemed that the two of them were playing in the water again. After a long time, the window opened and another pool of water smashed into the garden with a bang. After tossing and turning, the two of them always hid in the room to do things. It wouldn't be nice to say that, so the two of them decided to go out and take a stroll. Yu Qianqiu was lying on the bed half naked. He first drooled as he admired the beautiful scene of Wu Lixue's beautiful figure wearing clothes. One must know that Wu Lixue's impressive breasts were the biggest reason why he was attracted to her in the first place. Only after he was satisfied with the sight did he slowly wrap himself up. When they were about to leave, Yu Qianqiu saw Wu Lixue hugging the dinosaur egg that had rolled under the table. That thing had been adding color to the two's arduous battle the whole night. Yu Qianqiu had looked at it several times while they were fighting. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why are you always hugging it? Don't tell me you want to learn how to hatch eggs like a hen?" Wu Lixue opened her eyes wide and pouted. "When you're not here, it's always with me. I've gotten used to hugging it over the years." Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly. He reached out his hand and said, "Then let me hug it too." Wu Lixue gave him the egg. He hugged it and looked at it carefully. Ever since he bought it for Wu Lixue, this was the first time he looked at it carefully. He walked to the window and looked at it under the sunlight. He couldn't see what was inside. He wanted to use his divine sense to check, but found that it couldn't penetrate. He couldn't help but scratch his head. "Strange, why is this thing glowing?" He turned around and asked, "Have you ever thought of opening it to see what's inside?" Wu Lixue shook her head. "I'll break it if I open it. This is the first thing you've given me." "Why don't we open it now?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Wu Lixue shook her head resolutely. But Yu Qianqiu's curiosity was aroused. He even dared to barge into the underworld cave. How could he stop him? He said to Wu Lixue with a serious expression, "Have you ever thought that there might be some treasure inside? The treasure inside is the real thing I'm giving you." Wu Lixue was startled. Hearing him say that, her expression seemed to be a bit tempted. She asked suspiciously, "Is there really a treasure inside?" Yu Qianqiu nodded seriously. He patiently said, "From my experience in the cultivation world, there's a high chance that there's a treasure inside. How about we open it and see?" Wu Lixue was tempted by his words. She said, "If there's no treasure inside, then promise to give me something else as compensation." "No problem." Yu Qianqiu laughed. Since he had already convinced the owner of the dinosaur egg, he didn't hesitate to chop the egg. Puff! Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He slowly pulled his hand back from the egg. His hand was in pain, but the egg didn't react at all. "What's wrong?" Wu Lixue asked. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. His expression became serious. He began to pay attention to the dinosaur egg. With his current cultivation, even though he didn't use his full strength, his palm strike was enough to split open a large rock. Who would have thought that this thing would be so hard that it didn't react at all? He was now suspecting that this thing might actually be a treasure. In for a penny, in for a pound. Yu Qianqiu's temper flared up. He suddenly started punching and kicking the egg crazily. However, after a long time the egg didn't react at all. It wasn't just Yu Qianqiu. Even Wu Lixue was shocked. She never thought of breaking this thing, so she didn't know it was so hard. In her mind, Yu Qianqiu was known as the #1 cultivator below the soul formation stage, so his cultivation level must be very high. Even a piece of black iron should have been deformed by his attacks, but this so-called egg didn't have any reaction at all. This was incredible. Chapter 666. It can't be helped, it's forcing me to be ruthless. Yu Qianqiu laughed and placed the glowing dinosaur egg on the table with a sinister expression. Wu Lixue saw his sinister smile and couldn't help but ask in a small voice, "What do you want to do?" "Of course I want to open it," Yu Qianqiu said as he pulled out a large black saber from his storage pouch. Wu Lixue was dumbstruck. She naturally knew of the reputation of this large black saber. It was a treasured saber that could cut through anything. "Be careful, don't break the treasure inside," Wu Lixue said worriedly. "It's fine, I know what I'm doing." As he spoke, Yu Qianqiu's saber had already landed on the egg. Dong! A crisp sound rang out. The saber collided with the egg, emitting a sound that wasn't made of gold, wood, iron, or stone. The two of them looked over at the same time. The egg was still sitting on the table without any damage, but there was a white mark on its surface. Yu Qianqiu reached out to touch the white mark. Who would have thought that it would be like a chalk drawing, easily erasing it without a trace? The two of them looked at each other speechlessly. Yu Qianqiu looked at the large black saber in his hand, then looked at the egg-like glowing red object in disbelief. He simply couldn't believe that the unparalleled sharpness of his large black saber couldn't cut through this thing. Up until now, he only knew that the dark iron could slightly restrain the large black saber, but it couldn't completely block its sharpness. As for other things, it couldn't block them at all. Who would have thought that they would meet a tough opponent today? Wu Lishua's eyes were also filled with disbelief. She had heard that even soul formation stage experts wanted to steal this treasured saber, so it was easy to imagine how powerful it was. She never thought that the object she was always hugging would be so hard. She blankly said, "I can't open it, what do we do?" "I don't believe it." Yu Qianqiu spat. His saber whistled through the air, whistling through the air. With a ping sound, the table fell apart. The two of them could only watch as the egg smashed a hole in the floor and fell downstairs. There wasn't much commotion above, but there was a loud bang below. Even those standing above could feel the tremor. The two of them looked at each other, speechless. In for a penny, in for a pound. Since the floor was already broken, Yu Qianqiu dragged his saber and drew a circle on the floor, directly creating another large hole. Wu Lishua didn't have any objections and the two of them jumped down. In the end, he found that the stone floor at the bottom had been smashed into a deep pit, and the things in the room were destroyed by the flying rocks and soil. Even after 2 layers of buffering, Yu Qianqiu was still able to create a large hole. One could imagine how much strength Yu Qianqiu used. In the middle of the crater, the dinosaur egg lay there quietly. Its red light flickered as if it was looking down on someone's actions. Wu Lishua jumped into the hole and dug up the egg. After the two of them examined it carefully, they found that the broken thing was still stable and undamaged except for some dirt. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he sheathed his broadsword. He knew that if he couldn't even leave a mark on it, it would be futile to try to cut it again. He had to think of another way. At this moment, the sound of many people rushing down could be heard from the garden outside. It was obvious that they had been attracted by the commotion here. Yu Qianqiu took the egg from Wu Lishua's hands and gave her a look, signaling her to send them away. Then he scurried back through the hole on his head and hugged the egg to study it in the room. After a while, Wu Lishua hurriedly came back. When she entered the room, she was shocked and exclaimed, "What are you doing?" The room was flashing with green light. She saw Yu Qianqiu holding the egg with one hand. There was a brilliant green flame burning in his palm, wrapping around the egg in his hand and burning it. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and chuckled. "Since I can't split it open, I'll use fire. If fire still doesn't work, I'll boil it in water. In any case, I'll try all kinds of methods and it might work. If it really doesn't work, I can only give up. Who knows what this thing is? In any case, it can't be an egg. There can't be such a hard egg in this world. Maybe it's some rare material for refining artifacts. One day, I'll show it to the world's #1 refining expert, old ancestor Nan Ming. Maybe he'll recognize what it is." Wu Lishua nodded and silently stood beside him to observe. In the end, after half a day, there was no reaction from the egg. The red light was still flashing and even the color didn't change. Wu Lishua couldn't help but ask, "Is this going to work?" Treasure, it really is a treasure." Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue. Although he didn't know what it was, the big black knife couldn't split it open. Even the highest temperature of the condensed green fire couldn't burn it. Just based on these 2 points, this thing was definitely not ordinary. It wouldn't be too much to call it a treasure. "Let's boil it again." Yu Qianqiu did as he said. He opened his other hand and clear water flowed out of his palm like a spring. But at this moment, the two of them exclaimed in unison, and their gazes focused on the egg. They saw that the strange thing that was being burned by the green fire suddenly stopped flashing red. After the last flash of red light, the red light solidified on the surface and didn't disappear anymore. It wasn't like before where it kept flickering red and dark. However, the red light seemed to be stronger and brighter than before. Furthermore, it was getting more and more dazzling, illuminating the whole room in a bright red. What happened to it? Wu Lishua raised his hand to cover his eyes. It seems like burning it with fire is working. Continue burning it, I want to see what will happen. Yu Qianqiu put away the water that came out of his other hand. He squinted his eyes and continued to roast it with the green fire with an excited expression. However, when the red light was so strong that one couldn't look at it directly, The dazzling light started to recede, giving off a feeling that it had reached its peak. In the end, the red light became weaker and weaker. Slowly, the red ball that was being burned by the green fire turned into a black ball. The dazzling red light could no longer be seen, as if all the energy had been released. Wu Lishua's eyes widened and he asked again, "What happened to it?" "You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Suddenly his expression changed. He stared at the egg with his eyes wide open. He couldn't help but exclaim, and the green fire in his palm started to sway. Wu Lishue immediately asked, "What happened?" "What happened?" Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at Wu Lishue blankly and said in shock, "It seems to be absorbing my green fire." Wu Lishue cried out in alarm. "Then what do we do?" "Hurry up and throw it away." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and squinted. "Let it absorb, damn it. I'd like to see just what kind of trick it's playing." He did his best to stabilize the output of the green fire. But this black ball of fire was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much it sucked, it would never be full. It consumed most of the green fire elemental energy stored in Yu Qianqiu's body, but it was still absorbing. The green fire elemental energy in his body probably wasn't enough. Yu Qianqiu was wondering if he should take this thing to Twilight Valley's lair of green fire to see just how long it could absorb and what it would become. Suddenly, the black fellow's absorption speed increased, and the green fire before him was visibly being devoured. Alarmed, Yu Qianqiu clenched his teeth and tried to pour out all the green fire in his body, but the black fellow seemed rather sensible. It knew that Yu Qianqiu didn't have much left and was embarrassed to ask for more, so it suddenly stopped absorbing. Damn. This fellow really knows how to play with people. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. After a while, there was still no reaction, so he used the green fire in his palm to roast it a few more times, but there really was no reaction. Had it been full? Yu Qianqiu suspiciously withdrew the green fire back into his body and stared motionlessly at the black fellow. Wu Lishue looked at the black egg and then back at him. Seeing the rich variety of expressions on his face, she didn't know what was going on that outsiders didn't know. She wanted to ask what was going on, but when she saw Chen Changxing's unwavering gaze, she was afraid of disturbing him. After a long while, the two of them glanced at each other in confusion, wondering just what they had been doing all this time. The black egg was completely motionless. Outside, night had fallen, and the sky was filled with stars. Another day had passed. What do we do? Yu Qianqiu no longer had any temper with the black egg and didn't want to continue tormenting it, so he began to consult Wu Lishue. Wu Lishue took the black egg back and looked it up and down. Except that it no longer glowed, there was no difference from before. She turned her head and asked, "Don't you want to boil it with water?" Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He estimated that there would be no reaction even if he boiled it with water, so he didn't want to waste time. He looked out of the window and said with a smile, "Now it's dark. Let's get down to business. We'll talk about it later." After saying that, he held Wu Lishue up, causing the latter to exclaim. The two of them went to bed happily. As soon as they turned over the big quilt, Yu Qianqiu's complaining voice came, "My dear lady, didn't you just put it aside? Why did you suddenly appear out of nowhere and bring it up again? Give it to me." A big foot stretched out from under the quilt and kicked Haydn out. Then it kicked Haydn directly to the bottom of the bed and made him roll around. There was a lot of movement on the bed. The passionate love disturbed the tranquility of the night. The sun was rising, and it just bloomed with golden light on the distant horizon. Yu Qianqiu was sleeping in the quilt, but he was woken up by someone. He opened his sleepy eyelids and saw Wu Lishue staring at him, so he closed his eyes without hesitation and waved his arms to push Wu Lishue, who was supporting her upper body, down to sleep with him. Unexpectedly, Wu Lishue hurriedly pushed him awake again. She pointed outside the bed and said in surprise, "Look, look." Yu Qianqiu didn't know what she wanted him to look at. Suddenly he heard the sound of something rolling on the floor. He opened his eyes wide and looked back. He saw the black egg that was thrown to the ground yesterday was rolling on the ground alone. Chapter 667. What does that mean? Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. This thing that couldn't be cut open by the peerless sword and couldn't be burned by the green flame actually moved by itself. What the hell is going on? He was dumbfounded, but Wu Lishue, who was behind him, quickly put on his clothes and said excitedly, "Let me see what's wrong." Climbing over Yu Qianqiu, he didn't even have time to put on his shoes and socks. Barefooted, he got off the bed and ran over. That black egg rolled here and there. Seeing that it was about to roll into the hole that Yu Qianqiu dug on the floor, Wu Lishue bent down and picked it up. His big eyes were filled with curiosity as he stared at the egg without blinking. Holding it in his hands and shaking it, he put it to his ear to listen. Suddenly, he let out a cry and looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. Yu Qianqiu, there's really something moving inside. Yu Qianqiu revealed an idiotic expression and asked foolishly, "What's moving?" "I don't know." Wu Lishue looked at the black egg in his hands and asked, "Don't you think it looks like an egg? Do I need you to remind me? Not only does it look like an egg, but it also looks like a dinosaur egg." Yu Qianqiu sat up on the bed and rubbed his chin as he imagined the scene of a Tyrannosaurus Rex hatching from the egg and him taking it for a ride everywhere. But after thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't right. A dinosaur egg shouldn't be so tough that he couldn't open it no matter how hard he tried, right? Without any hesitation, he put on his clothes and jumped off the bed. He reached out and said, "Let me see." Wu Lishue handed the egg to him. Who knew that when he held it in his hands, his expression changed. He saw that the egg that was still quietly in Wu Lishue's arms immediately started to shake the moment it was in his hands. The egg shook violently, and even Yu Qianqiu's arms started to shake. Wu Lishue was confused, but Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He didn't know what it meant either. Beep, beep, beep. The entire room was filled with the sound of hurried rioting. Yu Qianqiu's face was flushed red. He used all his strength to hold onto the egg, and the man and the egg began to compete with each other. The egg in his hand reminded him of the pile drivers from his previous life. It was the kind of rapid vibration. In the end, Yu Qianqiu's whole body shook along with the egg in his hand. He held his breath and said, "You're so strong. I can't hold it anymore." F***CKU. Hey Dam was directly thrown out by him. It hit the wall with a ping sound, and then hit the ground with a bang sound rolling around. The strange thing was, as soon as the thing left Yu Qianqiu's hand, the do-do-do vibrating sound disappeared. The black egg rolled on the ground and stopped moving. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded again. He said in astonishment, F***CKU. It can't be so strange, right? Is there really something wrong with my character? Wu Lishue looked at the black egg and then looked at Yu Qianqiu. She couldn't help but laugh. Why was it fine in her hand, but it was haunted when it was in his hand? She held back her laughter and tentatively walked to the black egg to hold it. Sure enough, it was fine. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. Wu Lishue only took a glance at it and immediately burst into laughter. She laughed so hard that she rocked back and forth with joy. D***ing girl, if you dare to laugh again, I will strip your clothes and spank you. Yu Qianqiu threatened with a hazy face. I won't laugh, I won't laugh. Wu Lishue smiled and shook her head again and again. Suddenly, her smile froze on her face. She slowly looked down at her hand and said, Yu Qianqiu, come and have a look. It seems that there are many cracks on it. Really? Yu Qianqiu's face was suspicious, but then it turned into curiosity. He said excitedly, Where? Where? Let me have a look. His two outstretched hands just touched the egg and then he retracted them. He smiled embarrassedly, You hold it. This broken thing is not right with me. The two of them looked at each other's heads and carefully observed the surface of the black egg. If they didn't look carefully, they really couldn't find that there were crisscrossed and very regular tiny cracks on the surface of the black egg. The distance between the cracks was almost the same as the size of the square, as if this egg was put together by many pieces. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but reach out to touch the surface. He said with a tut-tut, It's really a crack. Is this thing really an egg? Is there something hatching in it? Suddenly there was a beep sound again. Yu Qianqiu quickly retracted his hand that was touching it. As expected, it verified the rule that he couldn't touch it. Wu Lishue looked at his embarrassed appearance of retracting his hand, and began to hold back a smile on her face again. However, she seemed to be complacent a little too early this time. It was good that Yu Qianqiu retracted his hand, but the beep sound sounded again, and it was very violent and continuous beep. Wu Lishue's cultivation was far worse than Yu Qianqiu's. The egg in her hand almost jumped out and her hands were jumping, and then there was no more movement. Looking at Wu Lishue's surprised expression, Yu Qianqiu finally felt a little better. At first he thought it was really because of his character that even this black egg didn't like him. Now it seemed that it had nothing to do with his character at all. It was just a coincidence before. Maybe there was really something hatching in this egg and it wanted to break the shell from the inside. Beep. Pop. Wu Lishue's arms jumped violently because of the jumping black egg. She almost let go of her hands, but she forcibly pulled them back. However, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, because he saw a little silver light popping out of the eggshell. It was sometimes black, sometimes silver, and sometimes black. Yuchencho stretched out his arm and caught the small piece that flipped in the air. He casually looked at it and suddenly said with a smile, "This egg is finally broken. It's not easy." Because of the slightly curved small piece in his hand, the slightly concave side was shining with dazzling silver light, and the slightly protruding side was black and inconspicuous. Obviously it was the eggshell of the black egg. Yuchencho shook the eggshell in his hand and said, "Lishue, look at what's inside the egg." Before he finished speaking, he found that without his reminder, Wu Lishue had already squinted one eye and curiously looked into the hole on the eggshell. As she looked, she muttered, "Yuchencho, I can't see clearly, but it's really beautiful inside, as if there are many colorful stars shining. Let me take a closer look." Little did she know that at this time, Yuchencho was staring at her with his mouth wide open. Just as Wu Lishue squinted her eyes to look inside the egg, he saw a colorful light shining from the hole on the eggshell shining on Wu Lishue's face. Then, like a dream, an incredible scene appeared. The colorful light shone confusedly, and the sparkling colorful stars twinkled delicately, intertwining to form a ray of colorful shining stars. Like a thin mist, it floated dreamily from the hole. Wu Lishue seemed to not notice it at all. She squinted one eye and continued to look. Her face was full of obsession, as if she was attracted by the gorgeous colors in the hole. As she breathed in and out, the thin mist that shone like the colorful stars was actually sucked in by her. She was still smacking her lips and sniffing with all her might. She said, "What is this? It smells so good. Yuchencho, do you smell it?" She took a few deep breaths in an intoxicated manner. As the first wisp of colorful shining mist was sucked in by her, countless colorful light spots that floated in the air began to gather on her body. Slowly, it started from her head and gradually covered her whole body. Yuchencho swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He didn't smell any fragrance, but he felt that the room was suddenly filled with an ancient and rich aura. It was very, very ancient. It made people have the urge to bow down and worship. What did he see at this time? The Wu Lishue in front of him was like a goddess who was shrouded in dreamy colors. She was barefooted, stepping on the colorful stars, and her whole body was shining with a holy light. More and more colorful star mist gently coiled around her body, and gradually condensed into a pair of almost illusory wings behind her. The ancient aura on the wings was especially dignified. It was the kind of ancient and incomparable noble aura, as if she was an eternal royal family. The colorful light in the room shone brilliantly, and the colorful wings that shone with the stars slowly spread open and gently flapped. Yuchencho even had an illusion that Wu Lishue was about to spread her wings and fly away, flying to the eternal stars in the universe. Wu Lishue was still looking at the hole with a face full of excitement and curiosity. She didn't seem to know the changes that had happened to her body. Yuchencho only felt that his mouth was dry. He wanted to call out to Wu Lishue, but he was a little speechless. He subconsciously felt that this was probably a good thing for Wu Lishue, and he should not disturb her. However, the scene in front of him was too dreamy. It was so beautiful that it was breathtaking. He had never seen anything like this before. After a long time, the dreamy colorful mist in the egg seemed to have dissipated. The large wings behind Wu Lishue also slowly retracted quietly, and then all the colorful light quietly attached to Wu Lishue's body and disappeared, as if it had drilled into Wu Lishue's body. The colorful color in the room also disappeared, and it returned to normal. Yuchencho silently stared at the egg in Wu Lishue's hands. If he hadn't experienced the strange things that happened to this strange egg from the beginning to the end, he wouldn't have believed that what he saw just now was real. However, he saw it clearly from the beginning to the end. He was the driving force behind the whole thing. Damn it. This egg was definitely not simple. Yuchencho looked at Wu Lishue, who was still holding the egg and looking at it from the hole with her eyes, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that the person involved didn't know what happened, and he was afraid that he was the only witness to this matter. This girl might have encountered some kind of fortuitous encounter. Yuchencho wanted to tell Wu Lishue what happened, but just as he opened his mouth, he thought about it and held it back. He felt that it was better not to tell her for the time being. This girl was too naive, and if someone with ulterior motives got something out of her mouth, it would harm her instead. As her man, he had the responsibility and obligation to protect her from harm. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.